None smelled of fear, only excitement, and Billy of ale. At least 10 men at once tried to tell him what had happened. Some were louder than others. "The Trollocs tried us here as well," Harry Copwood shouted. "But we showed them, didn't we?" There were murmurs of agreement, but just as many or more eyed each other doubtfully and shifted their feet. "We've some heroes here, too," Darl said in a loud, rough voice. "You and lot up at the wood aren't the only ones." A bigger man than his brother, he had that same weasel, narrow, Copwood face, the same tight mouth as if he had just bitten a green persimmon. When he thought Perrin was not looking, he shot him a spiteful look. It did not necessarily mean he really wished he had been up facing westward. Darl and Hari and most of their relatives usually found a way to see themselves being cheated, whatever the situation. "This calls for a drink," old Billy announced, then scowled in disappointment when no one echoed him. A head lifted above the distant wall and hurriedly ducked back down, but not before Perrin saw a brilliant yellow coat. "Not Trollocs," he growled disgustedly. "Tinkers! You were shooting at Pt.14. Get those wagons out of the way." Standing in his stirrups, he cupped his hands to his mouth. "You can come on," he shouted. "It is all right. No one will hurt you. I said move those wagons." He snapped at the men standing around staring at him. "Taking tinkers for Trollocs. And go fetch your arrows. You'll have real need for them sooner or later." Slowly, some moved to obey, and he shouted again. "No one will harm you. It is all right. Come on." The wagons rolled to either side with the creak of axles that needed grease. A few brightly garbed Tuathawan climbed over the fence, then a few more, and started toward the village in a hesitant, footsore half-run, seeming almost as afraid of what lay ahead as whatever lay behind. They huddled together at the sight of men dashing out from the village, balancing on the edge of turning back even when the two Rivers folk trotted by, looking at them curiously, to begin pulling arrows out of the dirt. Yet they did stumble on. Perrin's insides turned to ice. 20 men and women, perhaps, some carrying small children, and a handful of older children running too, their dazzling colors all torn and stained with dirt. And some with blood, he saw as they came closer. That was all. Out of how many in the caravan? There was Rain, at least, shuffling as though half-dazed and being guided by Iva. One side of her face a dark, swollen bruise. At least they had survived. Short of the opening, the Tuathawan stopped, staring uncertainly at the sharp stakes and the mass of armed men. Some of the children clutched their elders and hid their faces.
Give me 1 second.
They smelled of fear, of terror. Fail jumped down and ran to them, but though Isla hugged her, she did not take another step nearer. The older woman seemed to be drawing comfort from the younger. "We won't hurt you," Perrin said. "I should have made them come. The light burned me, I should have made them. You are welcome to our fires." "Tinkers!" Hari's mouth twisted scornfully. "What do we want with a bunch of thieving tinkers? Take everything that isn't nailed down." Darl opened his mouth to support Hari, no doubt, but before he could speak, someone in the crowd shouted, "So do you, Hari. And you'll take the nails, too." Sparse laughter snapped Darl's jaws shut. Not many laughed, though.
Quick bites
Those that did eyed the
ramen I
drug
made with some
one
leftover
down in discomfort.
taco meat.
"Hari is right," Daze Conger called, bulling through, pushing men out of her path. "Tinkers steal, and not just things. They steal children." Shoving away to Sen Bui, she shook a finger as thick as Sen's thumb under his nose. He backed away as much as he could in the press. She overtopped him by a head and outweighed him by half. "You are supposed to be on the village council, but if you don't want to listen to the wisdom, I'll bring the women's circle into this, and we will take care of it." Some of the men nodded, muttering. Sen scratched his thinning hair, eyeing the wisdom sideways. Well, it's Perrin," he said slowly in that scratchy voice. "The Tinkers still have a reputation, you know, and..." He cut off, jumping back as Perrin whirled Stepper to face the Two Rivers folk. A good many scattered before the done, but Perrin did not care. "We'll not turn anyone away," he said in a tight voice. "No one."
Got a ramen.
"Or do you mean to send children off
I
for the
heated up the
Trollocs?"
taco meat first.
One of the Tuathalan children began to cry,
And
sharp wailing. And he wished he had not said that.
Made the
Sen's
soup.
face went red as a beet, and even Days looked abashed. "Of course
Put
we
a
keep them in,"
couple
the Thatcher said gruffly.
sliced
He rounded on
jalapenos in
Days,
it.
all puffed up like a banty rooster, ready to fight a mastiff. "If you want to bring the women's circle into it, the village council will sit the whole lot of you down sharp. You see if we don't." "You always were an old fool, Sen Bowie," Dave snorted. "Do you think we'd let you send children back out there for Trollocs?" Sen's jaw worked furiously, but before he could get a word out, Dave put a hand on his narrow chest and thrust him aside. Donning a smile, she strode out to the Tuathalan and put a comforting arm around Island. "You'll just come along with me, and I'll see you all get hot baths and somewhere to rest. Every house is crowded, but we'll find places for everyone. Come." Marinal Deer came hurrying through the crowd, and Alsbeth Luhan, Daddy Coughlin, and Nisei Ellen, and more women, taking up children or putting arms around Tuathalan women, urging them along, scolding the Two Rivers men to make way. Not that anybody was balking now. It just took a little time for so many to jostle back and open a path. Fail gave Perrin an admiring look, but he shook his head. This was not Taviric work. Two Rivers people might need the right way pointed out to them sometimes, but they could see it when it was. Even Harry Coughlin, watching the Tinkers brought in, did not look as sour as he had. Well, not quite as sour. There was no use expecting miracles. Shambling by, Rain looked up at Perrin dully. "The way of the leaf is the right way. All things die in their appointed time," and he trailed off as if he could not remember what he had been going to say. "They came last night," Isla said, mumbling because of her swollen face. Her eyes were almost as glazed as her husband's. "The dogs might have helped us escape, but the children killed all the dogs, and there was nothing we could do." Behind her, Aram shivered in his yellow-striped coat, staring at all the armed men. Most of the Tinker children were crying now. Perrin frowned at the smoke rising to the south. Twisting in his saddle, he could make out more to the north and east. Even if most of those represented houses already abandoned, the Trollocs had had a busy night. How many would it take to fire that many farms, even running between and taking no more time than needed to toss a torch into an empty house or unwashed field? Maybe as many as they had killed today. What did that say about Trolloc numbers already in the Two Rivers? It did not seem possible one band had done it all, burning all those houses and destroying the traveling people's caravan too. Eyes falling on the Tuathalan being led away, he felt a stab of embarrassment. They had seen kith and kin killed last night. Here he was, coldly considering numbers. He could hear some of the Two Rivers men muttering, trying to decide which smoke represented whose farm. To all of these people, those fires meant real losses, lives to be rebuilt if they could, just numbers. He was useless here. Now, while Fail was caught up in helping see to the Tinkers, was the time for him to be off after Loyal and Gaul. Master Luhan, in his blacksmith's vest, long leather apron, caught Stepper's bridle. "Aaron, you have to help me. The Warders want me to make parts for more of those catapults. But I've 20 men clamoring for me to repair bits of armor their grandfathers' fool grandfathers bought from some fool merchant's guards." "I would like to give you a hand," Perrin said, "but I have something else that needs doing. I'd like they'd be rusty anyway. I haven't had much work at a forge the last year." "Light, I didn't mean that. Not for you to work a hammer." The blacksmith sounded shocked. "Every time I send one of those goose brains off with a bee in his ear, he's back 10 minutes later with a new argument. I cannot get any work done. They'll listen to you." Perrin doubted it, not if they would not listen to Master Luhan. Aside from being on the village council, Harl Luhan was big enough to pick up nearly any man in the Two Rivers and toss him out bodily if need be. But he went along to the makeshift forge Master Luhan had set up beneath a hastily built, open-sided shed near the green. 6 men clustered around the anvils, salvaged from the smithy the white bucks had burned, and another idly pumping the big leather bellows until the blacksmith chased him away from the long handles of the shaft.
Got one rolled up.
Perrin's surprised they did listen when he told them to go, with no speech to bend them round to Viren's will. Just a plain statement that Master Luhan was busy. Surely the blacksmith could have done as much himself, but he shook Perrin's hand and thanked him profusely before setting to work. Bending down from Stepper's saddle, Perrin caught one of the men by the shoulder, a bald-headed farmer named Get Eldon. Asked him to stay and warn off anyone else who tried to bother Master Luhan. Get must have been 3 times his age, but the leathery, wrinkle-faced man just nodded and took up a station near where Harl had his hammer ringing on hot iron. Now he could be off before Fail turned up. Before he could as much as turn, Stepper, Bran appeared, spear on his shoulder and steel cap under one stout arm. Perrin, there has to be a faster way to bring the shepherds and herdsmen in if we're attacked again. Even sending the fastest runners in the village, Abel couldn't get half of them back here before those Trollocs came out of the wood. That was easy to solve. A matter of remembering an old bugle, tarnished nearly black, that Sen Bowie had, hanging on his wall, and settling on a signal of 3 long blasts that the farthest
Give
shepherd
me
could
one
get.
sec. I'm gonna
It
finish
did bring
this
up signals
bowl
for other
of
things, of
ramen.
course,
Yeah,
such as sending
we'll
everyone to their
start it.
places if an attack was expected, which led to how to know when an attack was expected. Bane and Giad and the warders turned out to be more than amenable to scouting, but 4 were hardly enough, so good woodsmen and trackers had to be found, and provided with horses so they could reach Emmons Field ahead of any Trollocs they spotted. After that, Bull Doubtry had to be settled down. The white-haired old Fletcher, with a nose nearly as sharp as a broadhead point, knew very well that most farmers usually made their own arrows, but he was adamantly opposed to anyone helping him here in the village, as if he could keep every quiver filled by himself. Perrin was not sure how he smoothed Bull's ruffled temper, but somehow he left the man happily teaching a lot of boys to tie and glue goose-feather fletchings. Edward Canwin, the stout cooper, had a different problem. With so many folks needing water, he had more buckets and barrels to make than he could hoop in weeks alone. It did not take long to find him hands he trusted to chamfer staves at least, but more people came with questions and problems they seemed to think only Perrin had the answers for, from where to burn the bodies of the dead Trollocs, to whether it was safe to return to their farms to save what they could. That last he answered with a firm no whenever it was asked, and it was asked more often than any other, by men and women frowning at the smoke rising in the countryside. But most of the time he simply inquired what the questioner thought was a good solution and told him to do that. It was seldom he really had to come up with an answer. People knew what to do. They just had this fool notion they had to ask him. Daniel and Ben and the others found him and insisted on riding about at his heels with that banner, as if the big one over the green was not bad enough, until he sent them off to guard the men who had gone back to felling trees along the westwood. It seemed that Tam had told them some tale about something called the Companions in Ilion, soldiers who rode with the general of an Ilioner army and were thrown in wherever the battle was hottest. Tam, of all people. At least they took the banner with them. Perrin felt a right fool with that thing trailing after him. In the middle of the morning, Luke rode in, all golden-haired arrogance, nodding slightly to acknowledge a few cheers, and why anyone wanted to share this in the mystery. He brought a trophy that he pulled out of a leather bag and had set on a spear at the edge of the green for everyone to gawk at. A Murdrol's eyeless head. The fellow was modest enough, in a condescending sort of way, but he did let slip that he had killed the Fade when he ran into a band of Trollocs. An admiring train took him around to see the scene of the battle here. They were calling it that, where horses were dragging Trollocs off to great pyres already sending up pillars of oily black smoke. Luke was properly admiring in turn, making only 1 or 2 criticisms of how Perrin had disposed his men. That was how the Two Rivers folk told it, with Aaron lining everybody up and giving orders he certainly never had. The bear and Luke gave a patronizing smile of approval. You did very well, my boy. You are lucky, of course, but there is such a thing as the luck of the beginner, is there not? When he went off to his room in the Wine Spring Inn, Aaron had the head taken down and buried. Not a thing people should be staring at, especially the children. The questions continued as the day wore on until he suddenly realized the sun stood straight overhead. He had had nothing to eat, and his stomach was talking to him in no uncertain terms. Mistress Alcar, he said wearily to the long-faced woman at his stirrup, I suppose the children can play anywhere so long as somebody watches to make sure they don't go beyond the last houses. Light woman, you know that. You certainly know children better than I do. If you don't, how have you managed to raise 4 of your own? Her youngest was 6 years older than he was. Nella Alcar frowned and tossed her head, gray-streaked braid swinging. For a moment he thought she was going to snap his nose off, talking that way to her. He almost wished she would, for a change from everybody wanting to know what he thought should be done. Of course I know children, she said. I just want to make sure it's done the way you want. That's what we'll do then. Sighing, he only waited for her to turn away before reining Stepper around toward the Wine Spring Inn. 2 or 3 voices called to him, but he refused to listen. What he wanted done. What was wrong with these people? Two Rivers folk did not follow this way. Certainly not Emmons Fielders. They wanted a say in everything. Arguments in front of the village council,
gotta go wash the boat now.
among the council, had to come to blows before they occasioned comment. And if the women's circle thought they kept their own affairs more circumspect, there was not a man who did not know the meaning of tight-jawed women stalking about with their braids, all but bristling like angry cats' tails. What I want, he thought angrily. What I want is something to eat, someplace where no one is jabbering in my ear. Stepping down in front of the inn, he staggered and thought he could add a bed to that short list. Only midday, with Stepper doing all the work, and he already felt bone-weary. Maybe Fail had been right after all. Maybe going after Loyal and Gull really was a bad idea. When he walked into the common room, Mistress Alvear took one look at him and all but pushed him into a chair with a motherly smile. You can just give over handing out orders for a while, she told him firmly. Emmons Field can very well survive an hour by itself while you put some food inside you. She bustled away before he could say Emmons Field could very well survive by itself without him at all. The room was almost empty. Natty Coffin sat at one table rolling bandages, adding them to the pile in front of her. But she also managed to keep an eye on her daughters across the room, though both were old enough to be wearing their hair in a braid. The reason was plain enough. Bode and Eldrin sat on either side of Aram, coaxing the tinker to eat. Feeding him, actually, and wiping his chin, too. From the way they were grinning at the fellow, Perrin was surprised Natty was not at the table with them, braids or no. The fellow was good-looking, he supposed, maybe handsomer than Will Alcine. Bode and Eldrin certainly seemed to think so. For his part, Aram smiled back occasionally. They were plumply pretty girls. He would have to be blind not to see it, and Perrin did not think Aram was ever blind to a pretty girl. But he hardly swallowed without running a wide-eyed gaze over the spears and polearms against the walls. For Tuathalon, it had to be a horrible sight. Mr. Salvier said you had finally gotten tired of your saddle, Ariel said, popping in through the door to the kitchen. Startlingly, she wore a long white apron like Marin's. Her sleeves were pushed up above her elbows, and she had flour on her hands. As if just realizing it, she whipped the apron off, wiping her hands hastily, and laid it across the back of a chair. I have never baked anything before, she said, shoving her sleeves down as she joined in. It is rather fun kneading dough. I might like to do it again someday. If you don't bake, he said, where are we going to get bread? I don't intend to spend my whole life traveling, buying meals, or eating what I can snare or fetch with bow or sling. She smiled as if he had said something very pleasing, though he could not for the life of him see what. The cook will bake, of course. One of her helpers, really, I suppose, but the cook will oversee it. The cook, he mumbled, shaking his head. Oh, one of his helpers. Of course. Why didn't I think of that? What is the matter, Parrot? You look worried. I don't think the defenses could be any sounder without a fortress wall. It isn't. Fail, this Perrin Golden Eyes business is getting out of hand. I do not know who they think I am. They keep asking me what to do, asking if it's all right, when they already know what has to be done, when they could figure it out with 2 minutes thought. For a long moment she studied his face, those dark tilted eyes thoughtful, then said, How many years has it been since the Queen of Andor ruled here in fact? The Queen of Andor? I don't really know. 100 years, maybe. 200? What does that have to do with anything? These people do not remember how to deal with a queen or a king. Trying to puzzle it out. You must be patient with that. A king, he said weakly. He let his head drop down onto his arms on the table. Oh, right. Laughing softly, Faye ruffled his hair. Well, perhaps not that. I doubt very much that Morgaze would approve. A leader, at least. But she would very definitely approve a man who brought lands back to her that her throne has not controlled in 100 years or more. She would surely make that man a lord. Perrin of House Ibarra, Lord of the Two Rivers. There's a good sound. We do not need any lords in the Two Rivers, he growled from the oak tabletop, or kings or queens. We are free men. Free men can have a need to follow someone too, she said gently. Most men want to believe in something larger than themselves, something wider than their own fields. That is why there are nations, Perrin, and peoples. Even Rain and Isla see themselves as part of something more than their own caravan. They have lost their wagons and most of their family and friends, but other Tuathalan still seek the song, and they will again too, because they belong to more than a few wagons. Who owns these? Hiram asked suddenly. Perrin raised his head. The young tinker was on his feet, staring uneasily at the spears lining the walls. They belong to anybody who wants one, Hiram. Nobody is going to hurt you with any of them, believe me. He was not sure if Hiram did believe, not the way he began walking slowly around the room with his hands stuffed into his pockets, eyeing spears and halberds sideways. Perrin was more than grateful to dig in when Marin brought him a plate of sliced roast goose with turnips and peas and good crusty bread. At least he would have dug in if Fail had not tucked the flower-embroidered napkin under his chin and snatched the knife and fork out of his hands. She seemed to find it amusing to feed him the way Bode and Eldrin had been feeding Hiram. The Coffin girls giggled at him, and Natty and Marin wore little smiles too. Perrin did not see what was so funny. He was willing to indulge Fail, though, even if he could have fed himself more easily. She kept making him stretch his neck to take what she had on the fork. Hiram's slow wandering took him around the room 3 times before he stopped at the foot of the stairs, staring at the barrel of ill-assorted swords. Then he reached out and pulled a sword from the cluster, hefting it awkwardly. The leather-wrapped hilt was long enough for both of his hands. Can I use this one? He asked. Perrin nearly choked. Alana appeared at the head of the stairs with Isla. The Tuathalan woman looked weary, but the bruise was gone from her face. Best thing is sleep, the Aes Sedai was saying. It is shock to his mind that troubles him most, and I cannot heal that. Isla's eyes fell on her grandson and what he held, and she screamed as if that blade had gone into her flesh. No, Aaron! No! She almost fell in her haste to get down the stairs and flung herself on Aaron, trying to pull his hands from the sword. No, Aaron, she panted breathlessly. You must not. Put it down. The way of the leaf. You must not. The way of the leaf. Please, Aaron. Please. Aaron danced with her, fending her off clumsily, trying to hold the sword away from her. Why not? he shouted angrily. They killed Mother. I saw them. I might have saved her if I'd had a sword. I could have saved her. The words sliced at Baron's chest. The tinker with a sword seemed an unnatural thing, almost enough to make his hackles stand. But those words, his mother. Leave him alone, he said, more roughly than he intended. Any man has a right to defend himself. To defend his... He has a right. Aram pushed the sword toward Perrin. Will you teach me how to use it? I don't know how, Perrin told him. You can find someone, though. Tears rolled down Isla's contorted face. You tried to stick my daughter, she sobbed, her entire body shaking. And all my grandchildren but one. And now you take him. He is lost because of you, Perrin. You have become a wolf in your heart. And now you will make him one, too. Turning, she stumbled back up the steps, still racked with sobs. I could have saved her, Aram called after her. Grandmother, I could have saved her. She never looked back.
Hey, USA, how you doing?
He slumped against the banister.
Can't complain too much, but well, I can complain, but you know how that goes.
Perrin realized Bode was crying too, with her face.
You gotta hit my pins a couple of times and light a roach weed joint, because that's pretty much what I'm down to right now. But it's still something.
From the head of the stairs,
I can't complain, I guess.
And Fail's face was nearly as blank. Wiping his mouth, he tossed the napkin on the table and got up. There was still time to tell Aram to put the sword back and go ask Isla's pardon. Time to tell him what? That maybe next time he would not be there to watch his loved ones die. That maybe he could just come back to find their graves. He put a hand on Aram's shoulder. The man flinched, hunching around the sword, expecting him to take it. The tinker's scent carried a wash of fear and hate and sadness. Lost, Isla had called him. His eyes looked lost. Wash your face, Aram. Then go find Tamil Thor. Say, I ask him to teach you the sword. Slowly, the other man raised his face. Thank you, he said, scrubbing at the tears on his cheeks with his sleeve. Thank you. I will never forget this. Never, I swear it. Suddenly, he hoisted the sword to kiss
Nice. You fed him today?
The hilt had a brass wolf head for a pommel.
Aren't you watching your close?
Is that not how it is done? I suppose it is, Barrett said sadly, wondering why he should feel sad. The way of the least is a fine belief, like a dream.
I got a pile of clothes right there that
the dream that could not last.
I need to wash.
There was violence.
Or not wash, but I need to fold away and or fold up and put away.
A dream for some other man, some other time, some other age, perhaps. Go on, Aram. You have a lot to learn. There may not be much time. Still bubbling thanks, the tinker did not wait to wash his tears away, but ran straight out of the inn, carrying the sword upright before him in both hands. Conscious of Eldrin's scowl and Marin's fists on her hips, and Natty's frown, not to mention Bode's weeping, Baron walked back to his chair. Alana had gone from her place at the top of the stairs. Fail watched him pick up his knife and fork. You disapprove? He said quietly.
Yeah, we're grown.
Man has a right to defend himself, Fail.
We
Even if he can follow the way of the lead. I do not like to see
we got whatchamacallit.
His knife paused in cutting a piece of goose.
I think we got 5 or 6 outside. My brother Moshe's got one going in his tent. And then I got 2 going in
front door. He wore his round steel
in my tent.
Riders coming from the north, Baron. A lot of riders. I think it must be the white folks. Pail darted away as Perrin rose, and by the time he was outside on Stepper, with the mayor muttering to himself about what he meant to say to the white folks, she came riding her black mare around the side of the inn. More people were running north than stayed at their tasks. Perrin was in no particular hurry. The children of the light might well be there to arrest him. They probably were. He did not mean to go along in chains, but he was not anxious to ask people to fight white folks for him. He followed behind Bran, joining the stream of men and women and children crossing the wagon bridge, across the wine spring water, steppers and swallows' hooves clattering on the thick planks. A few tall willows grew here along the water. The bridge is where the north road began. That ran to Watch Hill.
The ones we got inside are
distant smoke plumes,
autoflower.
Fires burned themselves out.
And the ones outside are
where the road left the village, he found a pair of wagons.
Feminized ones, but they're photos.
Pointed slanting stakes with their bows and spears and such. Smelling of excitement, murmuring to each other, and all jammed together to watch what was coming down the road. Long double column of white-cloaked horsemen trailing a cloud of dust. Conical helmets and burnished plate and mail shining in the afternoon sun. Steel-tipped lances, all at the same angle. At their head rode a youngish man, stiff-backed and stern-faced, who looked vaguely familiar to Perrin. With the arrival of the mayor, the murmurs hushed expectantly. Or maybe it was Perrin's arrival that quieted them. 200 paces or so from the stakes, the stern-faced man raised a hand, and the column halted with sharp orders echoing down the files. He came on with just half a dozen white folks for company, running his eyes over the wagons and sharp stakes and the men behind. His manner would have lent him of importance even without the glaring sunburn. Luke had appeared from somewhere, resplendent in a tiny black stallion in rich gold embroidery. Perhaps it was natural enough that the white cloak officer chose to address himself to though his dark eyes continued to probe. "I'm Dane Bornholt," he announced, reining in. "Captain of the Children of the Light. You have done this for us? I have heard that Emmonsfield is closed to the children, yes? Truly a village of the shadow if it is closed to the children of the light." Dane Bornholt, not Jeffrem. The son, perhaps. Not that it made any difference. Perrin supposed one would try to arrest him as soon as another. Sure enough, Bornholt's gaze swept past him and jerked back. A convulsion seemed to seize the man. One gauntleted hand darted to his sword. His lips peeled back in a silent snarl, and for a moment Perrin was sure the man was about to charge, fling his horse onto the spiky barrier to reach him. The man looked as if he bore Perrin a personal hatred. Up close, that hard face had a touch of slackness to it, a shine in those eyes that Perrin was used to seeing in Billy Conger's. He thought he could smell brandy fumes. The hollow-cheeked man beside Bornholt was more than familiar. Perrin would never forget those deep-set eyes, like dark burning coals. Tall and gaunt and hard as an anvil, Jared Byar truly did look at him with hate. Whether or not Bornholt was a zealot, Byar surely was. Luke apparently had the sense not to try usurping Bran's place. Indeed, he appeared intent on examining the white-cloaked column as the dust settled, revealing more children stretching up the road. To Perrin's disgust, though, Bran looked to him, to the blacksmith's apprentice, waited for his nod before answering. He was the mayor. Bornholt and Byar plainly took note of the silent exchange. "Emmonsfield is not precisely closed to you," Bran said, standing up straight with his spear propped out to one side. "We have decided to defend ourselves, and have this very morning. If you want to see our work, look there." He pointed toward the smoke rising from the Trollocs' fire. The sickly, sweet smell of flesh drifted, but no one except Perrin seemed to know. "You have killed it," Bornholt said. "Your luck and skill amaze me. More than a few."
Now the Cushmans.
"Hundreds."
Now we do
"We have
some
battle," another voice cried.
key lime pie.
Dozens more shouted angrily on top of one another. "We fought them and won. Where were you? We can defend ourselves without any white cloaks. The two rivers and Perrin Golden Eyes. Golden Eyes. Golden Eyes." Left who should have been over guarding the woodsman, started waving that crimson wolf-head banner. Bornhold's hot-eyed hate took them all in, but Bayard danced his bay gelding forward with a snarl. "Do you farmers think you know battle?" he roared. "Last night one of your villages was all but wiped out by Trollocs. Wait until they come at you in numbers, and you will wish your mother had never kissed your father." He fell silent at a weary distance. A fierce trained dog obeying his master, but his words had quieted the Two Rivers people. "Which village?" Brand's voice was dignified and troubled both. "We own the people in Watch Hill and Devon Ride." "Watch Hill has not been troubled," Bornhold replied, "and I know nothing of Devon Ride. This morning a rider brought me word that Tarn Ferry hardly exists any longer. If you have friends there, many people did escape across the river." Across the river. His face tightened momentarily. "I myself lost nearly 50 good soldiers." The news produced a few queasy murmurs. No one liked to hear that sort of thing, but on the other hand, no one here knew anyone in Tarn Ferry. Likely none of them had ever been that far. Luke pushed his horse forward, the stallion snapping at stepper. Perrin reined his own mount tightly before the two began fighting, but Luke appeared not to notice or care. "Tarn Ferry," he said in a flat voice. "Trollocs attacked Tarn Ferry last night." "Well, I said it, did I not? It seems that the Trollocs have at last decided to raid the villages. How providential that you here were warned in time to prepare these fine defenses." His stare ran over the pointed hedge and the men behind it before settling on Perrin. "Was the man called Ordith at Tarn Ferry last night?" Luke asked. Perrin stared at him. He had not known Luke even knew of Palantain, or the name he used now. But people did talk, especially when someone they knew as a peddler came back with authority among white folks. Bornhold's reaction was as strange as the question. His eyes glittered at him as strong as he had shown for Perrin, his face went pale, and he pressed those slack lips with the back of his hand, as he had forgotten he wore steel-backed glasses. "You know Ordith?" he said, leaning toward Luke. It was Luke's turn to shrug casually. "I've seen him here and there since coming to the Two Rivers. A disreputable-looking man, and those who follow him no less. The sort who might have been careless enough to allow a Trolloc attack to succeed. Was he there? If so, one can hope he died for his folly. If not, one hopes you have him here with you, close under your eye." "I do not know where he is," Bornhold snapped, "or care. I did not come here to talk of Orton." His horse pranced nervously as Bornhold flung out a hand, pointing at Perrin. "I arrest you as a dark friend. You will be taken to Amador and there tried under the Dome of Truth." Bayard stared at his captain in disbelief. Behind the barrier separating the white folks from the Two Rivers men, angry mutters rose, spears and bills were hefted, bows raised. The farther white folks began spreading out in a gleaming line under shouted orders from a fellow as big in his armor as Master Luhan, sliding lances into holders along their saddles, unlimbering short horse bows. At that range, they could do little more than cover the escape of Bornhold and the men with him, if they did indeed manage an escape. But Bornhold appeared oblivious of any danger, and of anything at all save Perrin. "There will be no arrests," Brand said sharply. "We have decided that. No more arrests without proof of some crime, and proof we believe. You'll never show me anything to convince me Perrin is a dark friend, so you might as well put your hand down." "He betrayed my father to his death at Fulma," Bornhold shouted. Rage shook him. "Betrayed him to dark friends and Tarfallen witches who murdered 1,000 of the children with the One Power." Bayard nodded vigorously. Some of the Two Rivers folk shifted uncertainly. Word had spread of what Baron and Alana had done that morning, and the deeds had grown and spreading. Whatever they thought about Perrin, 100 tales of Aes Sedai, almost all wrong, made for easy belief in Aes Sedai destroying 1,000 white cloaks. And if they believe that, they might come to believe the rest. I betrayed no one, Perrin said in a loud voice so everyone could hear. If your father died at Falma, those who killed him are called the Seanchan. I don't know whether they are dark friends, but I do know they use the one power in battle. Liar! Spittle flew from Bornhald's lips. The Seanchan are a tale concocted by the White Tower to hide their foul lies. You are a dark friend. Bran shook his head wonderingly, pushing his steel cap over to one side so he could scratch his fringe of gray hair. I don't know anything about these Seanchan. About these Seanchan. What I do know is that Perrin is no dark friend, and you're not arresting anybody. The situation was growing more dangerous by the minute, Perrin realized. Bayar saw it and tugged at Bornhald's arm, whispering to him, but the White Cloak captain would not, or perhaps could not, back away now that he had Perrin in front of his eyes. Bran and the Two Rivers men had their heels planted too. They might not be willing to let the White Cloaks take him, even if he confessed to everything, boy. Unless someone tossed some water fast, everything was going to explode like a fistful of dry straw tossed on a forge fire. He hated having to think quickly. Boyle had the right of it. Hasty thinking led to people being hurt. But he thought he saw a way here. Are you willing to hold off my arrest, Bornhald, until the Trollocs are done with? I won't be going anywhere before then. Why should I hold off? The man was blind with hate. If he went on, a good many men were going to die, including him, most likely. And he could not see. There was no use pointing it out. Haven't you noticed all the farms burning this morning? Perrin said instead. He made a sweeping gesture that took in all the dwindling plumes of smoke. Look around. You said it yourself. The Trollocs aren't content with raiding a farm or two each night anymore. They are up to raiding villages. If you try to make it back to Watch Hill, you may not get there. You were lucky to come this far. But if you stay here in Emmons Field, Bran rounded on him, and other men shouted loud no's. Fail rode close and seized his arm, but he ignored all of them. You will know where I am, and your soldiers will be welcome to help our defenses. Are you sure about this, Perrin? Bran said, grabbing Stepper's stirrup. From the other side, Fail said urgently, No, Perrin. It is too great a risk. You must not. Please don't. Don't the light burn me to bloody ash. You must not do this. I won't have men fighting men if I can stop it, he told them firmly. We are not going to do the Trollocs' work for them. Fail practically flung his arm away. Scowling at Bornhald, she produced a sharpening stone from her pouch and a knife from somewhere, and began honing the blade with a silk-soft whisk. Harry Copland won't know what to think now, Bran said wryly. Straightening his round helmet, he turned back to the White Cloaks and planted his spear butt. You have heard his terms. Now hear mine. If you come into Emmons Field, you arrest no one without the say-so of the village council, which you will not get, so you arrest no one. You don't go into anybody's house unless you are asked. You make no trouble, and you share in the defense where and when you're asked. And I don't want to so much as smell a dragon's fang. Would you agree? If not, you can ride back as you came. Fire stared at the round man, as if a sheep had reared up on its hind legs and offered to wrestle. Bornhald never took his eyes off Perrin. Done, he said at last. Until the Trolloc threat is gone, done. Wrenching his horse around, he galloped back toward the line of his men, snowy cloak billowing around him. As the mayor ordered the wagons rolled aside, Perrin realized that Luke was looking at him. The fellow sat slumped easily in his saddle, a languorous hand on his sword hilt, blue eyes amused. I thought you would object, Perrin said. The way I hear you've been talking people up against the White Cloaks. Luke spread his hands smoothly. If these people want white cloaks among them, let them have white cloaks. But you should be careful, young golden eyes. I know something of taking an enemy into your bosom. His blade goes in quicker when he is close. With a laugh, he pushed his stallion off through the crowd, back into the village. He is right, Bayil said, still stropping a knife on the stone. Perhaps this Borno will keep his word not to arrest you. But what is to stop one of his men from putting a blade in your back? You should not have done this. I had to, he told her. Better than doing the Trollocs' work. The white cloaks were beginning to ride in, Bornhold and Bayar at their head. Those two glared at him with unabated hatred. For the others, riding by in pairs, cold, hard eyes and cold, hard faces swung to regard him as they passed. They did not hate, but they saw a dark friend when they saw him. And Bayar, at least, was capable of anything. He had had to do it, but he thought maybe it would not be such a bad idea to let Daniel and Van and the others follow him around the way they wanted to. He was not going to be able to sleep easy without somebody guarding his door. Guards. Like some fool lord. At least Bayil would be happy. Only he could make them lose that banner somewhere.
Chapter 46. Veils. The crowds were thick in the confined, winding streets of the Kalpena near the Great Circle. The smoke of countless cook fires rising above the high white walls gave the reason. Sour smells of smoke and cooking and long unwashed sweat hung heavy in the humid morning air, with the crying of children and the vague murmurs that always clung to large masses of people, together enough to muffle the shrill calls of the gulls sailing overhead. The shops in this area had long since locked the iron grills over their doors for good. Disgusted, Egyanin threaded her way through the throng of foot. It was dreadful that order had broken down enough for penniless refugees to take over the circles, sleeping among the stone benches. It was as bad as their rulers letting them starve. Her heart should have been gladdened. This dispirited rabble could never resist the Koren, and then proper order would be restored, but she hated looking at it. Most of the ragged people around her seemed too apathetic to wonder at a woman in their midst, in a clean, well-tended blue riding dress, silk, if plainly cut. Men and women in once fine garb, soiled and wrinkled now, speckled the crowd, so perhaps she did not stand out enough for contrast. The few who seemed to wonder whether her clothes meant coins in her purse were dissuaded by the competent way she carried her stout staff, as tall as she was. Guards and chair and bearers had to be left behind today. Floran Geld would surely have realized he was being followed by that array. At least this dress, with its divided skirts, gave her a little freedom of movement. Keeping the Weasley little man in sight was easy, even in this mass of people, despite having to dodge ox carts or the occasional wagon hauled by sweating, bare-chested men more often than animals. Geld and 7 or 8 companions, burly, rough-faced men all, shoved through in a moment, an eddy of curses following them. Those fellows angered her. Geld meant to try kidnapping again. He had found 3 women since she sent him the gold he had asked for, none more than casually resembling any on her list, and had whined over everyone she rejected. She should never have paid him for that first woman he snatched off the street. Greed and the memory of gold had apparently washed out the hide-flaying tongue-lashing she had given him, along with the purse. Shouts from behind pulled her head around and tightened her hands on the staff. A small space had opened up, as it always did around trouble. A bellowing man in a torn, once fine yellow coat was on his knees in the street, clutching his right arm where it bent the wrong way. Huddling over him protectively, a weeping woman in a tattered green gown was crying at a veiled fellow already melting into the crowd. "He only asked for a coin! He only asked!" The crowd swirled in around them again. Grimacing, Egyanin turned back, and stopped with an oath that drew a few startled glances. Gelb and his fellows had vanished. Pushing her way to a small stone fountain where water gushed from the mouth of a bronze fish on the side of a flat-roofed wine shop, she roughly displaced two of the women filling pots and leaped up onto the coping, ignoring their indignant curses. From there, she could see over the heads of the crowd. Cramped streets ran off in every direction, twisting around the hills. Bends and white-plastered buildings cut her view to less than 100 paces at best, but Gelb could not have gone farther than that in those few moments. Abruptly, she found him, hiding in a deep doorway 30 paces on, but up on his toes to peer down the street. The others were easy enough to locate then, leaning against buildings to either side of the street, trying not to be noticed. They were not the only ones lining the walls, but where the rest huddled dispiritedly, their scared, broken-nosed faces held expectation. So it was to be here, their abduction. Certainly no one would interfere, any more than people had when that fellow's arm was broken. But who? If Gelb had finally found someone on the list, she could go away and wait for him to sell her the woman, wait her chance to see if an Idam truly could hold other Sultan besides Bethlamin. However, she did not mean to face again the choice between slitting some unfortunate woman's throat and sending her off to be sold. There were plenty of women climbing up the street toward Gelb, most in those transparent veils, their hair braided. Without a second glance, Egyanin ruled out two in sedan chairs with bodyguards marching alongside. Gelb's street toughs would not tangle with near their own number, nor face swords with their fists. Whoever they were after would have no more than 2 or 3 men for company, if that, and none armed. That seemed to include all the other women in her view, whether in rags or drab country dresses, or the more clinging styles Tarabana women favored. Suddenly, 2 of those women, talking together as they rounded a far bend, seized Egyanin's eye. With their hair in slender braids and transparent veils across their faces, they appeared to be Tarabanas, but they were out of place here. Those thin, one green, the other blue, were silk, not fine-spun wool. Women clothed like that rode in sedan chairs. They did not walk, especially not here. And they did not carry barrel staves on their shoulders.
Hey Ben, how you doing, bro?
Dismissing the one with red gold hair, she studied the other. Her dark braids were unusually long, nearly to her waist. At this distance, the woman looked very much like a Sultan named Surin. Not Surin, though. This woman would have come no higher than Surin's chin. Muttering under her breath, Egyanin jumped down and began pushing through the jostling mass between her and Gelb. With luck, she could reach him in time to call him off. The fool. The greedy, weasel-brained fool. We should have hired shears, Nynaeve, Elaine said again, wondering for the 100th time how Tarabana women talked without catching the veils in their mouths. Spitting it out, she added, "We're going to have to use these things." A weedy-faced fellow stopped drifting toward them through the crowd when Nynaeve hefted her barrel.
Babylon, how you doing, bro?
That is what they are for. Her glare might have encouraged the man's loss of interest. She fumbled at the dark braids hanging over her shoulders and made a disgusted sound. Elaine did not know when she would become used to not having that one thick braid to tug. And feet are for walking. How could we look or ask questions being carried around like pigs to sale? I would feel a complete fool in one of those idiot chairs. In any case, I'd rather trust to my own wits than men I do not know. Elaine was sure Vale Doman could have provided trustworthy men. The sea folk certainly would have. She wished Wave Dancer had not sailed, but the sail mistress and her sister had been eager to spread word of the Paramore to Damtora and Cantorin. 20 bodyguards would have suited her very well. She sensed as much as felt something brushing the purse at her belt. Clutching at the purse with one hand, she spun around, raising her own stave. The throng flowing by spread a little around her, people barely glancing her way as they elbowed one another, but there was no sign of the would-be cut-purse. At least she could still feel the coins inside. She had taken to wearing her great serpent ring and the twisted stone terangrial on a cord around her neck, in imitation of Nynaeve, after the first time she had nearly lost a purse. In their 5 days in Tanchico, she had lost 3. 20 guards would be just about right, and a carriage, with curtains at the windows. Resuming the slow climb up the street beside Nynaeve, she said, "Then we should not be wearing these dresses. I can remember a time when you stuffed me into a farm girl's dress." "They make a good disguise," Nynaeve replied curtly. "We blend in." Elaine gave a small sniff, as if plainer dresses would not have blended even better. Nynaeve would not admit she had come to enjoy wearing silks and pretty dresses. Elaine simply wished she had not taken it so far. True, everyone took them for taraboners until they spoke at least. But even with a lace-trimmed neck right up under her chin, this close-draped green silk at least felt more revealing than anything she'd ever worn before. Certainly anything she had ever worn in public. Nynaeve, on the other hand, strode along the cramped street as if no one was looking at them at all. Well, maybe no one was. Not because of how their dresses fit, anyway. But it surely seemed they were. Their shifts would have been almost as decent. Cheeks heating, she tried to stop thinking of how the silk molded itself to her. "Stop that. It is perfectly decent. It is." "Didn't this Amis tell you anything that might help us?" "I told you what she said," Elaine sighed. Nynaeve had kept her up until the small hours talking about the Aiel Wise One, who had been with Egwene in Tel Rhiod last night, and then started in again before they sat down to breakfast. Egwene, with her hair in 2 braids for some reason, and shooting sullen frowns at the Wise One, had said almost nothing beyond that Rand was well and Avienda was looking after him. White-haired Amis had done all the talking, a stern lecture on the dangers of the world of dreams that had nearly made Elaine feel as if she were 10 again, and Linny, her old nurse, had caught her sneaking out of bed to steal candies, followed by cautions about concentration and controlling what she thought if she must enter Tel Rhiod. How could you control what you thought? I truly did think Perrin was with Rand and Matt. That had been the biggest surprise after Amis's appearance. Egwene apparently had thought he was with Nynaeve and her. "He and that girl have probably gone somewhere he can be a blacksmith in peace," Nynaeve said, but Elaine shook her head. "I do not think so." She had strong suspicions about Fael, and even if they were half right, Fael would not settle for being a blacksmith's wife. She spat out the veil once more. Idiotic thing. "Well, wherever he is," Nynaeve said, fumbling with her braids again, "I hope he is safe and well, but he is not here, and he cannot help us. Did you even ask Amis if she knew any way to use Tel Rhiod to..." A bulky, balding man in a worn brown coat shoved through the crowd and tried to throw thick arms around her. She whipped the barrel stave from her shoulder and gave him a crack across his broad face that sent him staggering back, clutching a nose that had surely been broken for at least the second time. Elaine was still gathering breath for a startled scream when a second man, just as big and with a thick mustache, pushed her aside to reach for Nynaeve. She forgot about being afraid. Her jaw tightened furiously, and just as his hands touched the other woman, she brought her own stave down on top of his head with every bit of strength she could muster. The fellow's legs folded, and he toppled on his face in a most satisfactory fashion. The crowd scattered back, no one wanting to be caught up in someone else's trouble. Certainly no one offered help, and they needed it, Elaine realized. The man Nynaeve had hit was still on his feet, mouth twisted in a snarl, licking away the blood that ran down from his nose, flexing thick hands as if he wanted to squeeze a throat. Worse, he was not alone. 7 more men were fanning out with him to cut off any escape, all but one as large as he, with scarred faces and hands that looked as if they'd been hammered on stone for years. A scrawny, narrow-cheeked fellow, grinning like a nervous fox, kept panting, "Don't let her get away. She's gold, I tell you. Gold." They knew who she was. This was no try for a purse. They meant to dispose of Nynaeve and abduct the daughter heir of Andor. She felt Nynaeve embracing Saidar. If this had not made her angry enough to channel, nothing ever would, and opened herself to the true source as well. The one power rushed into her, a sweet flood, filling her from toes to hair. A few woven flows of air from either of them could deal with these ruffians. But she did not channel, and neither did Nynaeve. Together they could drub these fellows as their mothers should have, yet they did not dare, unless there was no other choice. If one of the Black Ajah was close enough to see, they had already betrayed themselves with the glow of Saidar. Channeling enough for those few flows of air could betray them to a black sister on another street 100 paces or more away, depending on her strength and sensitivity. That was most of what they themselves had been doing the last 5 days, walking through the city, trying to sense a woman channeling, hoping the feeling would draw them to Leandrin and the others. The crowd itself had to be considered, too. A few people still went by to either side, brushing tight against the walls. The rest milled about, beginning to find other ways to go. Only a handful acknowledged the two women in danger with as much as shamefully averted eyes. But if they saw big men flung about by nothing visible, Aes Sedai and the One Power itself were not in particularly good odor in Tanchico at the moment, not with old rumors from Falma still floating about, and newer tales claiming that the White Tower supported the Dragon Sworn in the countryside. Those people might run if they saw the power wielded, or they might turn into a mob. Even if she and Nynaeve managed to avoid being torn limb from limb where they stood, which she was not certain they could, there was no way to cover it up after. The Black Ajah would hear of Aes Sedai and Tanchico before the sunset. Setting herself back to back with Nynaeve, Elaine gripped her stave tightly. She felt like laughing hysterically. If Nynaeve even mentioned going out alone again, walking, she would see who liked having her head dunked in a bucket of water. At least none of these louts looked eager to be the first to have his head cracked like the fellow lying still on the paving stones. "Go on," the narrow-faced man urged, waving his hands forward. "Go on, it's only two women." He made no move to rush in himself, though. "Go on, I say. We just need the one. She's gold, I tell you." Suddenly there was a loud thunk, and one of the ruffians staggered to his knees, clutching groggily at a split scalp, and a dark-haired, stern-faced woman in a blue riding dress flung herself past him, twisted sharply to backhand another fellow in the mouth with her fist, knocked his legs out from under him with a staff, then kicked him in the head as he fell. That there was help at all was startling, much less the source, but Elaine was of no mind to pick and choose. Nynaeve left her back with a wordless roar, and she dashed out, shouting, "Forward, the White Lion!" to belabor the nearest lout as hard and fast as she could. Flinging his arms up to defend himself, he looked shocked out of his wits. "Forward, the White Lion!" she shouted again, the battle cry of Andor, and he turned tail and ran. Laughing in spite of herself, she whirled about, seeking another to drub. Only two had not yet fled or fallen. That first broken-nosed fellow turned to run, and Nynaeve gave him a final full-armed thwack across the backside. The stern-faced woman somehow tangled the other's arm and shoulder with her staff, pulling him close and up on his toes at the same time. He would have overtopped her by a head, flat-footed, and he weighed twice what she did, but she coolly slammed the heel of her free hand up into his chin 3 times in rapid succession. His eyes rolled up in his head, but as he sagged, Elaine saw the narrow-faced man picking himself up off the street. His nose dripped blood, and his eyes looked half-glazed, yet he pulled a knife from his belt and lunged at the woman's back. Without thinking, Elaine channeled. A fist of air hurled the man and his knife into a backflip. The stern-faced woman spun, but he was already scrambling away on all fours until he could get his feet under him and burrow into the crowd farther up the street. People had stopped to watch the odd battle, though none had raised a hand to help except the dark-haired woman. She herself was staring from Elaine to Nynaeve uncertainly. Elaine wondered whether she had noticed the scrawny fellow being knocked down, apparently by nothing. "I give you my thanks," Nynaeve said a touch breathlessly as she approached the woman, straightening her veil. "I think we should leave here. I know the Civil Watch doesn't come out in the streets much, but I'd not like to explain this if they do happen by. Our inn is not far. Will you join us? A cup of tea is the least we can offer someone who actually lifts a hand to help someone in this light-forsaken city. My name is Nynaeve Almira, and this is Elaine Tricant." The woman hesitated visibly. She had noticed. I, I would like that. Yes, I would. She had a slurred way of speaking, difficult to understand, but somehow vaguely familiar. She was quite a lovely woman, really, seeming even fairer than she was because of her dark hair, worn almost to the shoulder. A bit too hard to be called a beauty. Her blue eyes had a strong look, as if she were used to giving orders. A merchant, perhaps, in that dress. "I am called Egyanin." Egyanin showed no hesitation in leaving with them down the nearest side street. The crowds were already gathering around the fallen men. Elaine expected those fellows would wake to find themselves stripped of anything of value, even clothes and boots. She wished she knew how they had discovered her identity, but there was no way to bring one along to find out. They were definitely going to have bodyguards from now on, no matter what Nynaeve said. Egyanin might not have been hesitant, but she was uneasy. Elaine could see it in her eyes as they wove through the crowd. "You saw, didn't you?" she asked. The woman missed a step, all the confirmation Elaine needed, and she added hurriedly, "We won't harm you. Certainly not after you came to our rescue." Again, she had to spit out her veil. Nynaeve did not seem to have that problem. "You needn't frown at me, Nynaeve. She saw what I did." "I know that," Nynaeve said dryly, "and it was the right thing to do. But we are not snug in your mother's palace, tucked away from prying ears." Her gesture took in the people around them. Between Egyanin's staff and their staves, most were giving them a wide berth. To Egyanin she said, "The larger part of any rumors you may have heard are not true. Few of them are. You need not be afraid of us, but you can understand there are matters we do not care to speak of here." "Afraid of you?" Egyanin looked startled. "I had not thought I should be. I will keep silent until you wish to speak." She was as good as her word. They walked on in silence through the murmurs of the crowd all the way back down the peninsula to the Three-Plum Court. All this walking was making Elaine's feet ache. A handful of men and women sat in the common room despite the early hour, nursing their wine or ale. The woman with her hammered dulcimer was being accompanied by a thin man playing a flute that sounded as reedy as he was. Julian sat at a table near the door, smoking a short-stemmed pipe. He had not returned from his nightly foray when they left. Elaine was glad to see that for once he did not have a new bruise or cut. What he called the underside of Tanchico seemed even rougher than the face the city presented to the world. His one concession to Tanchican dress had been to replace his flat straw hat with one of those dark conical felt caps which he wore perched on the back of his head. "I have found them," he said, hopping up from his bench and snatching off his cap before he saw they were not alone. He gave Egyanin a hooded look and a small bow. She returned it with an inclination of her head and a look just as guarded. "You found them?" Nynaeve exclaimed. "Are you sure? Speak, man, have you swallowed your tongue?" And her with her warnings about talking in front of other people. "I should have said I found where they were." He did not look at Egyanin again, but he chose his words carefully. "The woman with the white stripe in her hair led me to a house where she was staying with a number of other women, though few were ever seen outside. The locals thought they were rich escapees from the countryside. Little remains now, save a few scraps of food in the pantry. Even the servants are gone. But from one thing and another, I would say they left late yesterday or early last night. I doubt they have any fear of the night in Tanchico. Naive had a fistful of her narrow braids in a white-knuckled whip. "We went inside," she said in a very level voice. Elaine thought she was an inch from raising the stave dangling at her side. Julian seemed to think so too. Eyeing the stave, he said, "You know very well I take no risks with them. An empty house has a look about it, a feel, no matter how big. You cannot chase thieves as long as I have without learning to see as they do." "And if you had triggered a trap?" Nynaeve almost hissed the words. "Does your grand talent for feeling things extend to traps?" Julian's dark face went a little gray. He wet his lips as if to explain or defend himself, but she cut him off. "We will talk of this later, Master Sandor." Her eyes shifted slightly toward Egianen. Finally, she had remembered there were other ears there to hear. "Tell Rendra we will take tea in the Falling Blossoms room." "Chamber of Falling Blossoms," Elaine corrected softly, and Nynaeve shot her a look. Julian's news had left the older woman in a bad humor. He bowed deeply with his hands spread. "As you command, Mistress Almira, so I obey from the heart," he said wryly, then stuck his dark cap back on top of his head and stalked off, his back eloquently indignant. It must be uncomfortable to find yourself taking orders from someone with whom you had once tried to flirt.
Hell yeah.
"Man," Nynaeve growled. "We should have left both of them on the dock in Tyr." "He was your servant?" Egianen said slowly. "Yes," Nynaeve snapped, just as Elaine said no. They looked at each other, Nynaeve still frowning. "Perhaps he is, in a way," Elaine sighed, right on top of Nynaeve's muttered, "I suppose he is not at that." "I see," Egianen said. Rendra came bustling between the tables with a smile on her rosebud lips behind her veil. Elaine wished she did not look so much like Leandra. "Ah, you are so pretty this morning. Your dresses, they are magnificent, beautiful." As if the honey-haired woman had not had as much to do with choosing the fabric and cut as they. Her own was red enough for a tinker and definitely not suitable for public. "But you have been foolish again, yes? That is why the fine Julian wears the large scowl. You should not worry him so." A twinkle in her big brown eyes said Julian had found someone for his flirting. "Come, you will take your tea in the cool and the price. And if you must go out again, you will allow me to provide the bearers and the guards, yes? The pretty Elaine would not have lost so many purses if you were properly guarded. But we will not talk of such things now. Your tea, it is nearly prepared. Come." It had to be a learned skill. That was how Elaine saw it. You must have to learn how to talk without eating your veil. The Chamber of Falling Blossoms, located down a short corridor off the common room, was a small, windowless room with a low table and carved chairs with red seat cushions. Nynaeve and Elaine took their meals there, with Tom or Julian or both, when Nynaeve was not in the taking of them. The plastered brick walls, painted with a veritable grove of plum trees and a namesake shower of flowers, were thick enough to preclude any eavesdropping. Elaine practically tore her veil off and tossed the filmy scrap on the table before sitting. Even Tarragoner women did not try to eat or drink wearing the things. Nynaeve merely unfastened hers from her hair on one side. Rendra kept up her chatter while they were being served, her topics bouncing from a new seamstress who could sew them dresses in the newest style, from the thinnest imaginable silk. She suggested Egianen try the woman, getting a level look for reply. It did not faze her even a trifle. To why they should listen to Julian, since the city was just too dangerous for a woman to go out alone now, even in daylight. To a scented soap that would put the finest sheen on their hair. Elaine sometimes wondered how the woman ran such a successful inn when she seemed to think of nothing but her hair and her clothes. That she did was obvious. It was the how that puzzled Elaine. Of course, she did wear pretty clothes, just not entirely suitable. The servant who brought the tea in blue porcelain cups and tiny cakes on a tray was the slender, dark-eyed young man who had kept filling Elaine's wine cup on that very embarrassing night, and had cried again more than once, though she had privately vowed never again to drink more than a single cup. A handsome man, but she gave him her coolest stare, so that he hurried from the room gladly. Egyanin watched quietly until Rendra left too. "You are not what I expected," she said then, balancing her cup on her fingertips in an odd way. "The innkeeper babbles of frivolities as if you were her sisters and as foolish as she, and you allow it. The dark man, he is a servant of sorts, I think, mocks you. That serving boy stares with open hunger in his eyes, and you allow it. You are Aes Sedai, are you not?" Without waiting for an answer, she shifted her sharp blue eyes to Elaine. "And you are of the... You are nobly born." Nynaeve spoke of your mother's palace. "Such things do not count for very much in the White Tower," Elaine told her ruefully, hastily brushing cake crumbs from her chin. It was very spicy cake, almost sharp. "If a queen went there to learn, she would have to scrub floors like any other novice and jump when she was told." Egyanin nodded slowly. "So that is how you rule. By ruling the rulers. Do many queens go to be trained so?" "None that I know of," Elaine laughed. "Though it is our tradition in Andor for the daughter heir to go. A good many noblewomen go, really, though they usually do not want it known, and most leave, having failed to even sense the true source. It was only an example." "You are also of the noble?" Egyanin asked, and Nynaeve snorted. "My mother was a farm wife, and my father herded sheep and farmed tabak. Few where I come from can make do without wool and tabak both to sell. What of your parents, Egyanin?" "My father was a soldier, my mother an officer on the ship." For a moment she sipped her unsweetened tea, studying them. "You are searching for someone," she said at last. "For these women the dark man spoke of. I do some small trade in information, among other things. I have sources who tell me things. Perhaps I can help. I would not charge except to ask you to tell me more of Aes Sedai." "You have helped too much already," Elaine said hastily, remembering Nynaeve telling almost everything to Baal Doma. "I am grateful, but we could not accept more. Letting this woman know about the Black Aja and letting her become involved without knowing were equally out of the question. Truly we could not." Caught with her mouth half open, Nynaeve glared at her. "I was about to say the same," she said in a flat voice, then went on more brightly. "Our gratitude certainly extends to answering questions, Egyanin, as much as we can." She surely meant there were a good many questions for which they had no answers, but Egyanin took it differently. "Of course. I will not pry into the secret affairs of your White Tower." "You seem very interested in Aes Sedai," Elaine said. "I cannot sense the ability in you, but perhaps you can learn to channel." Egyanin almost dropped her porcelain cup. "It can be learned? I did not know. No, I do not want to learn." Her agitation made Elaine sad. Even among people not fearful of Aes Sedai, too many still feared anything to do with the One Power. "What do you want to know, Egyanin?" Before the woman could speak, a rap at the door was followed by Tom, in the rich brown cloak he had taken to wearing when he went out. It certainly attracted less notice than the gleeman's patch-covered garment. In fact, it made him appear quite dignified, with that mane of white hair, though he should brush it more. Imagining him younger, Elaine thought she could see what had first attracted her mother. That did not absolve him of leaving, of course. She smoothed her face before he could see her frown. "I was told you were not alone," he said. giving Egyanin a guarded look almost identical to Julian's. Men were always suspicious of anyone they did not know. But I thought you might like to hear that the Children of the Light surrounded the Panarch's palace this morning. The streets are beginning to buzz over it. It seems the Lady Amathera is to be invested as Panarch tomorrow. Tom, Nynaeve said wearily, unless this Amathera is really Leandrin, I do not care if she becomes Panarch, King, and Wisdom of the whole two rivers all rolled together. The interesting thing, Tom said, limping to the table, is that rumor says the Assembly refused to choose Amathera. Refused. So why is she being invested? Things this odd are worth noting, Nynaeve. As he started to lower himself into a chair, she said quietly, we are having a private conversation, Tom. I am sure you will find the common room more congenial. She took a sip of tea, eyeing him over the cup in clear expectation of his departure. Flushing, he levered himself back up without ever having actually sat, but he did not leave immediately. Whether the Assembly has changed its mind or not, this will likely cause riots. The streets still believe Amathera has been rejected. If you must insist on going out, you cannot go alone. He was looking at Nynaeve, but Elaine had the impression that he almost put a hand on her shoulder. Bail Domon is mired in that little room down near the docks, tying up his affairs in case he has to run, but he has agreed to provide 50 picked men, tough fellows used to a brawl and handy with knife or sword. Nynaeve opened her mouth, but Elaine cut her off. We are grateful, Tom, to you and Master Domon both. Please tell him we accept his kind and generous offer. Meeting Nynaeve's flat stare, she added meaningfully, I would not want to be kidnapped on the streets in broad daylight. No, Tom said. We would not want that. Elaine thought she heard a half-said child at the end of that, and this time he did touch her shoulder, a swift brush of fingers. Actually, he went on, the men are already waiting in the street outside. I'm trying to find a carriage. Those chairs are too long. He seemed to know he had gone too far, bringing Domon's men before they agreed, not to mention this talk of a carriage without a hint of asking first. But he faced them like an old wolf at bay, bushy eyebrows drawn down. I would regret, personally, if anything happened to you. The carriage will be here as soon as I can find a team, if there is one to be found. Eyes wide, Nynaeve was obviously teetering on the edge of whether or not to give him an upbraiding he would never forget, and Elaine would not have minded adding a gentler admonishment. Somewhat gentler. Child, indeed. He took advantage of their hesitation to sweep a bow that would have graced any palace, and departed while he had the chance. Egyanin had set down her cup and was staring at them in consternation. Elaine supposed they had not given a very good appearance of being Aes Sedai, letting Tom bully them. I must go, the woman said, rising and taking her staff from against the wall. But you have not asked your questions, Elaine protested. We owe you answers to them at the very least. Another time, Egyanin said after a moment. If it is permitted, I will come another time. I need to learn about you. You are not what I expected. They assured her she could come any time they were there and tried to convince her to stay long enough to finish her tea and cakes, but she was adamant that she had to leave now. Turning from seeing the woman to the door, Nynaeve put her fists on her hips. Kidnap you? If you have forgotten, Elaine, it was me those men tried to grab. To take you out of the way so they could seize me, Elaine said. If you have forgotten, I am the daughter heir of Andor. My mother would have made them wealthy to have me back. Perhaps, Nynaeve muttered doubtfully. Well, at least they were nothing to do with Leandrin. That lot wouldn't send a pack of louts to try stuffing us in a sack. Why do men always do things without asking? Does growing hair on their chests sap their brains? The sudden change did not confuse Elaine. We do not have to worry about finding bodyguards at any rate. You do agree they are necessary, even if Tom did overstep himself. I suppose so. Nynaeve had a remarkable dislike for admitting she was wrong, thinking those men had been after her, for instance. Elaine, do you realize we still have nothing except an empty house? If Julian or Tom slips and lets himself be found out, we must find the Black Sisters without them suspecting, or we will never have a chance of following them to whatever this thing is that's dangerous to Rand. I know, Elaine said patiently. We have discussed it. The older woman frowned at nothing. We still have not a glimmer as to what it is or where. I know. Even if we could bag Leandrin and the rest right this minute, we cannot leave it floating about out there, waiting for someone else to find. I know that, Nynaeve. Reminding herself to be patient, Elaine softened her tone. We will find them. They must make some sort of slip, and between Tom's rumors and Julian's thieves and Baal Domon's sailors, we will learn of it. Nynaeve's frown became thoughtful. Did you notice Ekianen's eyes when Tom mentioned Domon? No. Do you think she knows him? Why would she not say so? I do not know, Nynaeve said vexedly. Her face did not change, but her eyes. She was startled. She knows him. I wonder what... Someone tapped softly on the door. Is everyone in Tanchico going to march in on us? She growled, jerking it open. Rendra gave a start at the look on Nynaeve's face, but her ever-present smile returned immediately. Forgive me for disturbing you, but there is the woman below who asks for you. Not by name, but she describes you as you stand. She says that she believes she knows you. She is... That rosebud mouth tightened in a slight grimace. I forgot to ask her name. This morning I am the Witless Goat. She's a well-dressed woman, not yet to her middle years, not a terrible. She gave a little shiver. A stern woman, I think. When first she saw me, she looked at me as my older sister did when we were children, and she was thinking of tying my braids to the bush. Or have they found us first? Nynaeve said softly. Elaine embraced the true source before she thought of it, and felt a shudder of relief that she could, that she had not been shielded unaware. If the woman below was Black Archer, but if she was, why announce herself? Even so, she wished the glow of Saidar surrounded Nynaeve too. If only the woman could channel without anger. Send her in, Nynaeve said, and Elaine realized she was very much aware of her lack and afraid. As Rendra turned to go, Elaine began weaving flows of air, thick as cables and ready to bind, flows of spirit to shield another from the source. If this woman so much as resembled one on their list, if she tried to channel a spark... The woman who stepped into the chamber of falling blossoms in a shimmering black silk gown of unfamiliar cut was no one Elaine had ever seen before, and surely not on the list of the women who had gone with Leandrin. Dark hair spilling loose to her shoulders framed a sturdily handsome face with large dark eyes and smooth cheeks, but not with Aes Sedai agelessness. Smiling, she closed the door behind her. Forgive me, but I thought you were... The glow of Saidar surrounded her, and she... Elaine released the true source. There was something very commanding in those dark eyes, in the halo around her, the pale radiance of the one power. She was the most regal woman Elaine had ever seen. Elaine found herself hurriedly curtsying, flushing that she had considered... What had she considered? So hard to think. The woman studied them for a moment, then gave a satisfied nod and swept to the table, taking the carved chair at its head. Come here where I can see you both more closely, she said in a peremptory voice. Come. Yes, that's it. Elaine realized she was standing beside the table, looking down at the dark-eyed, glowing woman. She did hope that was all right. On the other side of the table, Nynaeve had a tangle of her long, thin braids gripped in her fist, but she stared at the visitor with a foolishly rapt expression. It made Elaine want to giggle. About what I have come to expect, the woman said. Little more than girls, and obviously not close to half-trained, strong strong enough to be more than troublesome, especially you. She fixed Nynaeve with her eyes. You might become something one day, but you've blocked yourself, haven't you? We would have had that out of you, though you howled for it. Nynaeve still had that tight hold on her braids, but her face went from a pleased, girlish smile at praise to shamed lip trembling. I'm sorry I blocked myself, she almost whimpered. I'm afraid of it. All that power, the one power. How can I be silent unless I ask a question? The woman said firmly. And do not start crying. You are joyful at seeing me, ecstatic. All you want is to please me and answer my questions truthfully. Nynaeve nodded vigorously, smiling even more rapturously than before. Elaine realized that she was too. She was sure she could answer the questions first. Anything to please this woman. Now, are you alone? Are there any other Aes Sedai with you? No, Elaine said quickly in answer to the first question, and just as fast to the second. There are no Aes Sedai with us. Perhaps she should tell that they were not really Aes Sedai either, but she had not been asked that. Nynaeve glared at her, knuckles white on her braids. Furious. Why are you in this city? The woman. You're hunting Black Sisters, Nynaeve burst out, shooting Elaine a triumphant look. The handsome woman laughed. So that is why I have not felt you channel before today. Wise of you to keep low when it is 11 to 2. I have always followed that policy myself. Let other fools leap about in full view. They can be brought low by a spider hiding in the cracks. A spider they never see until it is too late. Tell me all you have discovered about these Black Sisters. All you know of them. Elaine spilled out everything, battling with Nynaeve to be first. It was not very much. Their descriptions, the ter'angreal they had stolen, the murders in the tower, and the fear of more Black Sisters still there, aiding one of the Forsaken in Tyr before the stone fell, their flight here seeking something dangerous to Rand. They were all staying in a house together, Elaine finished up, panting. But they left last night. It seems you came very close, the woman said slowly. Very close. ter'angreal. Turn out your purses on the table, your pouches. They did, and she fingered quickly through coins and sewing kits and handkerchiefs and the like. Do you have any ter'angreal in your rooms? Angreal or sa'angreal? Elaine was conscious of the twisted stone ring hanging between her breasts, but that was not the question. No, she said. They had none of those things in their room. Pushing everything away, the woman leaned back, speaking half to herself. Randall Thor. So that is his name now. Her face crumpled in a momentary grimace. An arrogant man who stank of piety and goodness. Is he still the same? No, do not bother to answer that. An idle question. So Balal is dead. The other sounds like Ishamael to me, all his pride of being only half caught, whatever the price. There was less human left in him than any of us when I saw him again. I think he half believed he was the great lord of the dark. All his 3,000 years of machinations, and it comes to an untaught boy hunting him down. My way is best. Softly, softly, in the shadows. Something to control a man who can channel. Yes, it would have to be that. Her eyes turned sharp, studying them in turn. Now, what to do with you? Elaine waited patiently. Nynaeve wore a silly smile, her lips parted expectantly. It looked especially foolish with the way she was gripping her braids. You are too strong to waste. You may be useful one day. I would love to see Ravin's eyes the day he meets you unblocked, she told Nynaeve. I would put you off this hunt of yours if I could. A pity compulsion is so limited. Still, with the little you have learned, you are too far behind to catch up now. I suppose I must collect you later and see to your retraining. She stood, and suddenly Elaine's entire body tingled. Her brain seemed to shiver. She was conscious of nothing but the woman's voice, roaring in her ears from a great distance. You will pick up your things from the table, and when you have replaced them where they belong, you will remember nothing of what happened here, except that I came, thinking you were friends I knew from the country. I was mistaken, I had a cup of tea, and I left. Elaine blinked and wondered why she was tying her purse back beside her belt pouch. Nynaeve was frowning at her own hands, adjusting her pouch. A nice woman, Elaine said, rubbing her forehead. She had a headache coming on. Did she give her name? I don't remember. Nice? Nynaeve's hand came up and gave a sharp tug to her braids. She stared as if it had moved of its own accord. I do not think she did. What were we talking of when she came in? Egyanin had just gone. What had it been? I remember what I was about to say, Nynaeve's voice firm. We must find the Black Sisters without them suspecting, or we will never have a chance of following them to whatever this thing is that's dangerous to Rand. I know, Elaine said patiently. Had she said that already? Of course not. We had discussed it. At the arched gates leading from the inn's small courtyard, Egyanin paused, studying the hard-faced men who lounged, barefoot and often bare-chested, among the idlers on this side of the narrow street. They looked as if they could use the curved boarding swords hanging at their belts or thrust through their sashes, but none of those faces looked familiar. If any of them had been on Baal Domon's ship when she took him and it to Falma, she did not remember. If any had been, it was to be hoped none connected a woman in a riding dress to the woman in armor who had captured their vessel. Suddenly she realized her palms were damp. Aes Sedai. Women who could wield the power and not decently leashed. She had sat at the same table with them, talked with them. They were not at all what she had expected. She could not dig that thought out of her head. They could channel, therefore they were dangerous to proper order. Therefore they must be safely leashed, and yet not at all what she had been taught. It could be learned. Learned! As long as she could avoid Baal Domon, he would surely recognize her. She should be able to return. She had to learn more than ever she had to. Wishing she had a hooded cloak, she took a firm grip on her staff and started up the street, threading her way into the passing throng. None of the sailors looked at her twice, and she watched them to be sure. She did not see the pale-haired man in filthy Tanchican garb huddled against the front of a white-plastered wine shop on the other side of the street. His eyes, blue above a dingy veil and a thick mustache held in place with glue, followed her before sliding back to the three-plumb court. Standing, he crossed the street, ignoring the disgusting way people brushed against him. Egyanin had nearly spotted him when he had forgotten himself enough to break that fool's arm.
1 second. I'll be right back.
As such
I
things
can
were
put this in the fridge.
lands,
Not that good when it's a little
without
warm.
enough honor to open his veins. Disgusting. Perhaps he could learn more of what she was up to in this inn once they realized he had more coin than his clothes suggested. Chapter 47. The Truth of a Viewing. The papers scattered on Swan Sanche's desk held little real interest for her, but she persevered. Others handled the day-to-day routine of the White Tower, of course, to leave the Amerlin seat free for important decisions. But her habit had always been to check one or two things at random each day with no notice beforehand, and she would not break it now. She would not let herself be distracted by worries. Everything was sailing along according to plan. Shifting her striped stole, she dipped her pen carefully in the ink and ticked off another corrected total. Today she was examining lists of kitchen purchases and the Mason's report on an addition to the library. The sheer number of petty peculations people thought they could slip by always amazed her. So did the number that escaped notice by the woman who oversaw these matters. For instance, Lara seemed to think watching accounts was beneath her since her title had been changed officially from simple chief cook to mistress of the kitchens. Danelle, on the other hand, the young brown sister who was supposed to be watching Master Jobarin, the mason, was most likely letting herself be distracted by the books the fellow kept finding for her. That was the only way to explain her failure to question the number of workmen Jovarin claimed to have hired, with the first shipments of stone from Candor just arriving at North Harbor. He could rebuild the entire library with that many men. Danelle was simply too dreamy, even for a Brown. Perhaps a little time on a farm working penance would wake her. Laras would be more difficult to discipline. She was not Aes Sedai, so her authority with undercooks and scullions and potboys could be swamped all too easily. But perhaps she too could be sent for a rest in the country. That would, with a snort of disgust, Swan threw her pen down, grimacing at the blot it made on a page of neatly totaled columns. Wasting my time deciding whether to send Laris out to pull weeds, she muttered. The woman is too fat to bend over far enough. It was not Laris's weight that had her temper jumping, and she knew it. The woman was no heavier now than she'd always been, or so it seemed, and it never interfered with her running the kitchens. There was no news. That was what had her flapping like a fisher bird whose catch had been stolen. One message from Warrain that the Alfor boy had Calendor, then nothing in the weeks since, although rumors in the streets were already beginning to get his name right. Still nothing. Lifting the hinged lid of the ornately carved blackwood box where she kept her most secret papers, she rummaged inside. A small warding woven around the box ensured no hand but hers could safely open it. The first paper she pulled out was a report that the novice who had seen Min's arrival had vanished from the farm she'd been sent to, and the woman who owned the farm, too. Hardly unheard of for a novice to run away, but the farmer leaving, too, was troublesome. Sarah would have to be found, certainly. She had not progressed far enough in her training to be let loose, but there was no real reason to keep the report in the box. It mentioned neither Min's name nor the reason the girl had been sent to hoe cabbages, but she put it back anyway. These were days to take care that might seem unreasonable at another time. A description of a gathering in Gleildan to listen to this man who called himself the prophet of the Lord Dragon. Masema, it seemed his name was. Odd. That was a Shinaran name. Nearly 10,000 people had come to listen to him speak from a hillside, proclaiming the return of the dragon, a speech followed by a battle with soldiers trying to disperse them. Aside from the fact that the soldiers apparently got the worst of it, the interesting thing was that this Masema knew Rand Alfor's name. That definitely went back into the box. A report that nothing had yet been found of Mazrin time. No reason for that to be in there. Another on worsening conditions in Arad Doman and Tarabon. Ships vanishing along the Arith Ocean coast. Rumors of Tyran incursions into Kyria. She was getting into the habit of putting everything in this box. None of that needed to be kept secret. 2 sisters had vanished in Ilion, and another in Caneland. She shivered, wondering where the Forsaken were. Too many of her agents had gone silent. There were lionfish out there, and she was swimming in darkness. There it was. The silk-thin slip of paper crackled as she unrolled it. The sling has been used. The shepherd holds the stone. The whole of the tower had voted as she had expected, unanimously and with no need for arm twisting, much less invoking her authority. If a man had drawn Calendor, he must be the dragon reborn, and that man had to be guided by the White Tower. 3 sitters for 3 different Ajas had proposed holding all plans close in the hall before she even suggested it. The surprise
I
had
don't have
been that
much. I
one was
haven't
a
used my
lighter,
pipe.
but then the Reds would surely want the tightest hawsers possible kept on a
Turn this
man-made channel. The sole problem had been to stop a delegation from being sent to Tyr to take him in hand, and that had not really been difficult. Not when
These
she was
things are
able to
cool
say
to
that her
have
news
because you
came
have
from
a
an Aes Sedai who had
screen
already
right
managed
there.
to put herself close to her.
That way when you smoke in it,
But what was he doing now? Why had Moiraine not sent further word? Impatience hung so thick in the hall now that she almost expected the air to sparkle.
it ashes out. It doesn't get in your mouth.
Burn the woman. Why hasn't she sent word? The door crashed open and she straightened furiously as more than a dozen women strode into her study, led by Elida. All wore their shawls, most red-fringed, but cool-faced Alviarin, a white, was at Elida's side, and Jolene Maza, a slender green, and plump Chimarin of the yellow came close behind with Danelle, her big blue eyes not dreamy at all. In fact, Swan saw at least one woman from every Aja except the blue. Some looked nervous, but most wore grim determination, and Elida's dark eyes held stern confidence, even triumph. What is the meaning
Hell
of
yeah,
this?
Babylon.
Swan snapped,
That sounds tasty.
slapping the blackwood box shut with a sharp clack. She bounced to her feet and strode around the desk. First Marlene, and now this. If this is about tyrant matters, Elida, you know better than to bring others into it. And you know better than to walk in here as if this were your mother's kitchen. Make your apologies and leave before I make you wish you were an ignorant novice again. Her cold rage should have sent them scurrying, but though a few shifted uneasily, none made a move toward the door. Little Danelle actually smirked at her, and Elida calmly reached out and pulled the striped stole from Swan's shoulders. You will not need this any longer, she said. You were never fit for it, Swan. Shock turned Swan's tongue to stone. This was madness. This was impossible. In a rage, she reached for Saidar and suffered her second shock. A barrier lay between her and the true source like a wall of thick glass. She stared at Elida in disbelief. As if to mock her, the radiance of Saidar sprang up around Elida. She stood helpless as the Red Sister wove flows of air around her from shoulders to waist, crushing her arms to her side. She could barely breathe. You must be mad, she rasped. All of you! I'll have your hides for this! Release me! No one answered. They almost seemed to ignore her. Alviarin ruffled through the papers on the table, quickly yet unhurriedly. Jolene and Danelle and others began tilting up the books on the reading stands, shaking them to see if anything fell out from between the pages. The White Sister gave a small hiss of vexation at not finding what she sought on the table, then flipped open the lid of the blackwood box. Instantly, the box flared in a ball of flame. Alviarin leaped back with a cry, shaking a hand where blisters were already forming. Warded, she muttered, as close to open anger as a white ever came. So small that I never felt it until too late. Nothing remained of the box and its contents but a heap of gray ash atop a square charred into the tabletop. Elida's face showed no disappointment. I promise you, Swan, that you will tell me every word that burned, who it was meant for and to what purpose. You must be taken by the dragon, Swan snapped. I will have your hide for this, Elida. All of your hides. You will be lucky if the hall of the tower doesn't vote to still all of you. Elida's tiny smile did not touch her eyes. The hall convened not an hour ago, enough sitters to meet our laws, and by unanimous vote as required, you are no longer our. It is done, and we are here to see it enforced. Swan's stomach turned to ice, and a small voice in the back of her head shrieked, What do they know? Light! How much do they know? Fool! Blind fool! Woman! She kept her face smooth, though. This was not the first hard corner she had ever been in. A 15-year-old with nothing but her bake knife hauled into an alley by 4 hard-eyed louts with their bellies full of cheap wine. That had been harder to escape than this. So she told herself. Enough to meet the laws, she sneered. A bare minimum, heavy with your friends and those you can influence or bully. That Elida had been able to convince even a relatively small number of sitters was enough to dry her throat, but she would not let it show. When the full hall meets with all the sitters, you'll learn your mistake. Too late. There has never been a rebellion inside the tower. 1,000 years from now, they'll be using your fate to teach novices what happens to rebels. Tendrils of doubt crept onto some of those faces. It seemed Elida did not have as tight a grip on her conspirators as she thought. It's time to stop trying to hack a hole in the hull and start bailing. Even you can still mitigate your offense, Elida. Elida waited with chill calm until she was done. Then her full-armed slap exploded across Swan's face. She staggered, silver black flecks dancing in her vision. You are finished, Elida said. Did you think we would allow you to destroy the tower? Bring her. Swan stumbled as two of the Reds pushed her forward. Barely keeping her feet, she glared at them, but went as they directed. Who did she need to get word to? Whatever charges had been brought, she could counter them, given time. Even charges involving Rand, they could not fasten more than rumors to her, and she had played the great game too long to be beaten by rumors, unless they had men. Men could clothe rumors in truth. She ground her teeth. Burn my soul, I'll use this lot for fish bait. In the antechamber she stumbled again, but not from pushing this time. She had half hoped that Lyanna had been away from her post, but the keeper stood as Swan did, arms stiffly at her sides, mouth working soundlessly, furiously around a gag of air. She had certainly sensed Lyanna being bound and never realized it. In the tower there was always the feel of women channeling. Yet it was not the sight of Lyanna that made her miss her step, but the tall, slender, gray-haired man stretched on the floor with a knife rising from his back. Ulrich had been her warder for close to 20 years, never complaining when her path kept them in the tower, never muttering when being the Amelin's warder sent him hundreds of leagues from her, a thing none of the Gaideen liked. She cleared her throat, but her voice was still husky when she spoke. I'll have your hide salted and stretched in the sun for this, Elida. I swear it. Consider your own hide, Swan, Elida said, moving closer to stare her in the eyes. There is more to this than has been revealed so far. I know it. And you are going to tell me every last scrap of it. Every last scrap. The sudden quiet in her voice was more frightening than all her hard stares had been. I promise it, Swan. Take her below. Clutching bolts of blue silk, Min strolled in through the north gate near midday, her simper all ready for the guards, with the flame of Tarvalin on their chests, the girlish swirl of her green skirts that Elminrida would give. She had actually begun before she realized there were no guards. The heavy iron-strap door of the star-shaped guardhouse stood open. The guardhouse itself looked empty. It was impossible. No gate to the tower grounds was ever unguarded. Halfway to the huge bone-white shaft of the tower itself, a plume of smoke was rising above the trees. It seemed to be near the quarters for the young men who studied under the warders. Maybe the fire had pulled the guards away. Still feeling a little uneasy, she started down the unpaved path through the wooded part of the grounds, shifting the bolts of silk. She did not really want another dress, but how could she refuse when Laris pressed a purse of silver into her hands and told her to use it for this silk the stout woman had seen? She claimed it was just the color to set off Elminrida's complexion. Whether or not she wanted her complexion set off was less important than keeping Laris's goodwill. A rattle of swords reached her ears through the trees. The warders must have their students practicing harder than usual. It was all very irritating. Laris and her beauty hints, Gawain and his jokes, Galad paying her compliments and never realizing what his face and smile did to a woman's pulse. Was this how Rand wanted her? Would he actually see her if she wore dresses and simpered at him like a brainless chit? He has no right to expect it, she thought furiously. It was all his fault. She would not be there now, wearing a full dress and smiling like an idiot if not for him. I wear coat and breeches, and that is that. Maybe I'll wear a dress once in a while, maybe, but not to make some man look at me. I wager he's staring at some tyrant woman with half her bosom exposed right this minute. I can wear a dress like that. Let's see what he thinks when he sees me in this blue silk. I'll have a neckline down to... What was she thinking? The man had robbed her of her wits. The Amerlin's seat was keeping her here useless, and Rand al'Thor was addling her brain. Burn him! Burn him for doing this to me. The clash of swords came again from the distance, and she stopped as a horde of young men burst out of the trees ahead of her, carrying spears and bared blades, Gawain at their head. She recognized others from among those who had come to study with the warders. Shouts rose somewhere else in the grounds, a roar of angry men. Gawain, what is happening? He whirled at the sound of her voice. Worry and fear filled his blue eyes, and his face was a mask of determination not to get into them. Men, what are you doing? Get out of the grounds, men. It is dangerous. A handful of the young men ran on, but most waited impatiently for him. It seemed to her that most of the warder's students were there. Tell me what's happening, Gawain. The Amerlin was deposed this morning. Leave, men. The bolts of silk fell from her hands. Deposed? It can't be. How? Why? In the name of the light, why? Gawain! One of the young men called, and others took it up, brandishing their weapons. Gawain! The white boar! Gawain! I have no time, he told her urgently. There's fighting everywhere. Mr. Hamar is trying to break Swan Sante free. I have to go to the tower, men. Leave, please. He turned and set out at a run toward the tower. The others followed, bristling with upraised weapons, some still shouting, Gawain, the white boar! Gawain! Forward, the younglings! Men stared after them. You did not say what side you are on, Gawain, she whispered. The sounds of fighting were louder, clearer now that she was paying attention, and the shouts and yells, the clash of steel on steel seemed to come from every direction. The clamor made her skin crawl and her knees shake. This could not be happening. Not here. Gawain was right. It would be much the safer thing, much the smarter, to leave the tower grounds immediately. Only there was no telling when or if she would be allowed back, and she could not think of much good she could do outside. What good can I do inside? She asked herself fiercely. But she did not turn back toward the gate. Leaving the silk where it lay, she hurried into the trees, looking for a place to hide. She did not think anyone would spit Elminrida like a goose. Shivering, she wished she had not thought of it that way. But there was no use in taking foolish chances. Sooner or later, the fighting had to die down, and by that time she needed to decide what to do next. In the pitch blackness of the cell, Swan opened her eyes, stirred, winced, and was still. Was it morning yet outside? The questioning had gone on for a long time. She tried to forget pain in the luxury of knowing she was still breathing. The rough stone beneath her scraped her welts and bruises, though, those on her back. Sweat stung all of them. She felt a solid mass of pain from knees to shoulders, and it made her shiver in the cold air besides. They could have left me my shift at least. The air smelled of old dust and dried mold, of age, one of the deep cells. No one had been confined down here since Arthur Hawkwing's time, not since Bombwing. She grimaced into the dark. There was no forgetting. Clamping her teeth, she pushed up to a sitting position on the stone floor and felt around her for a wall to lean against. The stone blocks of the wall were cool against her back. Small things, she told herself. Think of small things. Heat, cold. I wonder when they'll bring me some water. If they will. She could not help feeling for her great serpent ring. It was no longer on her finger. Not that she expected it. She thought she remembered when they had ripped it off. Things had grown hazy after a time. Thankfully, blessedly hazy. But she remembered telling them everything, eventually. Almost everything. The triumph of holding back a scrap here, a bit there, in between howling answers, eager to answer if only they would stop, even for a little while, if only. She wrapped her arms around herself to stop her shudders. It did not look very well. I will remain calm. I am not dead. I must remember that above everything else. I am not dead. Mother? Liana's unsteady voice came out of the darkness. Are you awake, Mother? I'm awake, Swan sighed. She had hoped they had released Liana, put her out of the city. Guilt stabbed her at feeling a bit of comfort from the presence of the other woman sharing her cell. I am sorry I got you into this, Doc. No, she had no right to call her that now. I am sorry, Liana. There was a long moment of silence. Are you all right? Swan, Liana. Just Swan. Despite herself, she tried to embrace Saidar. There was nothing there. Not for her. Only the emptiness inside. Never again. A lifetime of purpose, and now she was rudderless, adrift on a sea far darker than this cell. She scrubbed a tear from her cheek, angry at letting it fall. I am not the Amelin Seat anymore, Liana. Some of the anger crept into her voice. I suppose Elida will be raised in my place, if she hasn't been already. I swear, one day I will feed that woman to the silver pike. Liana's only answer was a long, despairing breath. The grate of a key in the rusty iron lock brought Swan's head. No one had thought to oil the works before throwing Liana and her in, and the corroded parts did not want to turn. Grimly, she forced herself to her feet. Up, Liana, get up. After a moment, she heard the other woman complying and muttering to herself between soft moans. In a slightly louder voice, Liana said, What good would it do? At least they won't find us huddling on the floor and weeping. She tried to make her voice firm. We can fight. As long as we are alive, we can fight. They stilled me. Forcing her mind to blankness, she clenched her fists and tried to dig her toes into the uneven stone floor. She wished the noise in her throat did not sound so much like a whimper. Min set her bundles on the floor and tossed back her cloak so she could use both hands on the key. Twice as long as her hand, it was as rusty as the lock, just like the other keys on the big iron ring. The air was cold and damp, as though summer did not reach this far down. Hurry, child, Laris muttered, holding the lantern for Min, peering both ways down the otherwise dark stone hall. It was hard to believe that the woman with all her chins had ever been a beauty, but Min surely thought her beautiful now. Fighting the key, she shook her head. She had encountered Laris while sneaking back to her room for the plain gray riding dress she now wore, and for a few other things. Actually, she had found the massive woman looking for her in a tizzy of worry about El Mindrida, exclaiming over how lucky Min was to be safe, and proposing to all but lock her in her room until the trouble was past to keep her so. She was still not sure how Laris had wormed her intentions out of her, and she still could not get over her shock when the woman reluctantly announced she would help. A venturesome lass after her own heart, indeed. Well, I hope she can, how did she put it? Keep me out of the pickling kettle. Bloody key would not turn. She threw all of her weight into trying to twist it. In truth, she was grateful to Laris in more ways than one. It was doubtful she could have readied everything by herself, or even found some of it, surely not this quickly. Besides which, Besides which, when she ran into Laris, she had already begun telling herself she was a fool even to think of doing this, that she should be on a horse and off for Tyr while she had the chance, before someone decided to add her head to those decorating the front of the tower. Running away, she suspected, would have been the sort of thing she would never have been able to forget. That alone had made her grateful enough not to object in the slightest when Laris added some pretty dresses to what she herself had already packed. The rouges and powders could always be lost somewhere. Why won't this bloody key turn? Maybe Laris can. The key shifted suddenly, twisted with a snap so loud that Min feared something had broken. But when she pushed at the rough wooden door, it opened. Snatching up the bundles, she stepped into the bare stone cell and stopped in confusion. The lantern light revealed two women clad only in dark bruises and red welts. shielding their eyes from the sudden light. But for a moment, Min was not sure they were the right two. One was tall and coppery-skinned, the other shorter, sturdier, more fair. The faces looked right, almost right, and untouched by whatever had been done to them, so she should have been certain. But the agelessness that marked Aes Sedai seemed to have melted away. She would have had no hesitation at all in thinking these women were just 6 or 7 years older than herself at most, and not Aes Sedai at all. Her face heated with embarrassment at the thought. She saw no images, no auras around either. There were always images and auras around Aes Sedai. Stop that, she told herself. Where? One of the two began wonderingly, then paused to clear her throat. How did you get those keys? It was Swan Sanche's voice. It is her. Lara sounded disbelieving. She poked Min with a thick finger. Hurry, child. I'm too old and slow to be having adventures. Min gave her a startled look. The woman had insisted on the coming. She would not be left out, she had said. Min wanted to ask Swan why the pair of them suddenly looked so much younger, but there was no time for frivolous questions. I'm too used to being outmaneuvered. Thrusting one of her bundles at each of the naked women, she spoke rapidly. Clothes. Dress as quickly as you can. I don't know how much time we have. I let the guard think I'd trade a few kisses for a chance to repay you for
Hey,
a
High
grudge.
Life, how
And
you
while he
doing,
was
bro?
distracted, Laris came up behind him,
Hope you're doing
cracked him
well.
over the head with a rolling pin. I do not know how long he'll sleep. She leaned back through the door to peer worriedly down the hall toward the guard room. We had best hurry. Swan had already undone her bundle and begun to put on the clothes it contained. Except for a linen shift, they were all plain woolens in shades of brown, suitable for farm women come to the White Tower to consult the Aes Sedai, though the skirts divided for riding were a little unusual. Laris had done most of the needlework. Min had mostly just stuck herself. Liana was also covering her nakedness, but she seemed more interested in the short-bladed knife hanging from her belt than in the clothes themselves. 3 plainly dressed women had a chance, at least, of leaving the tower without attracting notice. A number of petitioners and people seeking help had been caught inside the tower by the fighting. 3 more creeping out of hiding should be hustled into the street, of course, so long as they were not recognized. The other women's faces might help, too. No one was likely to take a pair of young seeming at least, women for the Amerlin seat and the keeper of the chronicles. Former Amerlin and former keeper, she reminded herself. Only one guard, Swan said, wincing as she tugged on thick stockings. Strange. They guard a cup purse better than that. Eyeing Laris, she pushed her feet into the sturdy shoes. It is good to see some do not believe the charges against me, whatever they are. The stout woman frowned and lowered her chins, giving herself a fourth. I am loyal to the tower, she said sternly. Such matters are not for me. I'm only a cook. This foolish girl has had me remembering too much of being a foolish girl myself. I think, seeing you, it's time for me to remember I am not a willowy girl any longer. She pushed the lantern into Min's hands. Min caught her stout arm as she turned to go. Laris, you won't give us away. Not now, after all you have done. The woman's wide face split in a smile, half reminiscent, half rueful. Oh, Elminda, you do remind me of me when I was your age. Foolish doings and near to getting myself hanged sometimes. I will not betray you, child, but I must live here. When second is run, I will send a girl with wine for supper. If he has not wakened or been discovered by then, that will give you more than an hour. Turning to the other 2 women, she suddenly wore the hard scowl Min
Oh, that's what I'm doing right now.
Undercooks and the like. You use that hour well here. They mean to stick you in the scullery, I understand, so they can haul you out for examples. I'd not care one way or the other. Such matters are for Aes Sedai, not cooks. One Amerlin is the same as another to me. But if you get this child caught, You can expect me to be striping your hides from sunup to sundown while you and I head down in greasy pots of cleaning slop. You'll wish they had cut off your heads. And don't think they'll believe I helped. Everyone knows I keep to my kitchens. You mark me, jump. The smile popped back onto her face, and she pinched Min's cheek. You hurry them along, child. Oh, I am going to miss dressing you. Such a pretty child. With a last vigorous pinch, she waddled out of the cell at a near trot. Min rubbed her cheek irritably. She hated it when Loris did that. The woman was as strong as a horse. Near to hanging? What kind of lively girl had Loris been? Gingerly pulling her dress over her head, Liana sniffed loudly. To think she could speak to you in that manner. Her face popped out at the top, scowling. I am surprised she helped at all if she feels that way. But she did help, Min told her. Remember that, and I think she'll keep her word not to give us away. I am sure of it. Liana sniffed again. Swan swung her cloak around her shoulders. It makes a difference, Liana, that I have no more claim to that title. It makes a difference when tomorrow you and I might be two of her scullery guns. Liana clasped her hands to keep them from shaking, and would not look at her. Swan went on calmly, if in a dry tone.
I don't have a second one loaded, but I have a bowl loaded. Because I ain't got any roaches right now to smoke, but I got a little bit of a smoke. So
I suggest you move yourself.
I'm just loading a bowl right now. I'm smoking a bowl right now.
When I was a girl, and I don't doubt I still would. Liana sullenly began doing up the laces of the country dress. Swan turned her attention to Min. You may not be so eager to help us, and I tell you we've both been. Still, her voice did not shake, but it was stiff with the effort of saying the word, and her eyes looked pained and lost. It was a shock to realize her calm was all on the surface. Any one of the accepted could tie the pair of us into a running sheep's foot. Most of the novices could. I know, Min said, careful to keep her tone clear of the smallest hint of sympathy. Sympathy now might break what self-control the other women had left, and she needed them in control of themselves. It was announced at every square in the city and posted wherever they could nail up a notice, but you are still alive. Liana gave a bitter laugh, which she ignored. We had best go. That guard might wake, or somebody check on him. Lead me, Swan said. We are in your hands. After a moment, Liana gave a short nod and hurriedly donned her cloak. In the guard room at the end of the dark hall, the lone guard lay stretched out, face down on the dusty floor. The helmet that would have saved him a sore head sat on the rough plank table beside the single lantern that provided the room's light. He seemed to be breathing all right. Min did not spare him more than a glance, though she hoped he was not badly hurt. He had not tried to press the advantage of her offer. She hurried Swan and Liana through the far door, all thick planks and wide iron straps, up the narrow stone stairs. They had to keep moving. Passing for petitioners would not save them from questioning if they were seen coming from the cells. They saw no more guards nor anyone else as they climbed out of the bowels of the tower, but Min still found herself holding her breath until they reached the small door that led into the tower proper. Cracking it just enough to poke her head through, she peeked both ways down the corridor. Gilded lampstands stood against frieze-banded walls of white marble. To the right, two women moved swiftly out of sight without looking back. The sureness of their steps marked them Aes Sedai, even if she could not see their faces. In the tower, even a queen walked hesitantly. In the other direction, half a dozen men stalked away, just as clearly warders, with their wolfish grace and cloaks that faded into the surroundings. She waited until the warders were gone, too, before slipping through the doorway. It's clear. Come on. Keep your hoods up and your heads down. Act a little frightened. For her part, it was no pretense. From the silent way the two women followed her, she did not think they needed to pretend either. The halls of the tower were seldom full, yet now they seemed empty. Occasionally, someone appeared for a moment ahead of them or down a side corridor, but whether Aes Sedai or warder or servant, all were hurrying, too intent on their own affairs to notice anyone else. The tower was silent, too. Then they passed a crossing hallway where dark blotches of dried blood flecked the pale green floor tiles. Two larger patches stretched off in long smears, as if bodies had been dragged away. Swan stopped, staring. "What has happened?" she demanded. "Tell me, men." Liana gripped the hilt of her belt knife and peered around as if expecting an attack. "Fighting," Min said reluctantly. She had hoped the two women would be out of the tower grounds, even out of the city, before learning of this. She herded them around the dark stains, prodded them on when they tried to look back. "It began yesterday, right after you were taken, and did not stop until maybe 2 hours ago. Not completely." "You mean the Gaidin?" Liana exclaimed. "Warders? Fighting each other?" "Warders, the guardsmen, everyone. It started when some men who came claiming to be masons, 200 or 300 of them, tried to seize the tower itself right after your arrest was announced." Swan scowled. "Danelle, I should have realized there was more to it than not paying attention." Her face twisted more until Min thought she might begin crying. "Arthur Hawkwing could not do it, but we did it ourselves." Edge of tears or not, her voice was fierce. "The light help us. We have broken the tower." Her long sigh seemed to empty her of breath, and anger too. "I suppose," she said sadly after a moment, "I should be glad that some of the tower supported me, but I almost wish they had not." Lynn tried to keep her face expressionless, but those sharp blue eyes seemed to interpret every flicker of an eyelash. "Or did they support me, Lynn?" "Some did." She had no intention of telling her how few, not yet. But she had to prevent Swan thinking she still had partisans inside the tower. "Elida didn't wait to find out if the Blue Aja would stand for you or not. There isn't a Blue Sister still in the tower. Not alive, I know that." "Shiriam?" Liana asked anxiously. "Anaya?" "I don't know. There are not many greens left either. Not in the tower. The other Ajas split, one way and another. Most of the reds are still here. As far as I know, everybody who opposed Elida has either fled or else they are dead." "Swan." It seemed odd calling her that. Liana muttered angrily under her breath, but calling her mother would only be a mockery now. "Swan, the charges posted against you claim you and Liana arranged Masrin Time's escape. Loghain got away during the fighting, and they've blamed that on you, too. They don't quite name you Dark Friends. I suppose that would be too close to Black Aja, but they do not miss by much. I think
Show everyone
Ozzy.
Ozzy.
They won't even admit the truth," Swan said softly.
He's all
"That
stretched
they
out
mean to
today.
do exactly what they pulled me down for."
Huh, Ozzy.
"Dark Friends?" Liana murmured in bewilderment. "They named us? Why would they not?" Swan breathed. "What would they not dare? But they dared so much." They hunched their shoulders in their cloaks and let Min lead them as she would. She just wished their faces did not look so hopeless. As they drew nearer an outside door, she began to breathe more easily. She had horses hidden in a wooded part of the grounds, not far from one of the western gates. There was still the question of how easy it would be to actually ride out, but once they reached the horses, she would feel the next thing to free. Surely the gate guards would not stop three women leaving. She kept telling herself that. The door she sought appeared ahead, a small, plain paneled door, letting onto a path not much used, just opposite where this hall met the broad corridor that ran all the way around the tower. Elida's face caught her eye, sweeping down the outer corridor toward her. Min's knees thudded onto the floor tiles, and she huddled head down and face hidden by her hood, heart trying to pound through her ribs. "A petitioner, that's all I am. Just a simple woman with nothing to do with what's happened. Oh, light, please." She raised her head just enough to peek under the edge of her hood. half expecting to see a gloating Elida staring down at her. Elida swept by without a glance in Min's direction, a broad striped stole of the Amalin's seat around her shoulders. Alviarin followed, wearing the stole of the Keeper of the Chronicles, white for her Aja. A dozen or more Aes Sedai passed at Alviarin's heels, mostly reds, though Min saw 2 yellow-fringed shawls, a green one, and a brown. 6 warders flanked the procession, hands on hilts and eyes wary. Those eyes swept across the 3 kneeling women and dismissed. They were all 3 kneeling, Min realized, and realized, too, that she had almost expected Swan and Lyanna to launch themselves at Elida's throat. Both women had lifted their heads just enough to watch the procession make its way on down the corridor. Very few women have been stilled, Swan said, as if to herself, and none have survived long. But it is said that one way to survive is to find something you want as much as you want it to channel. That lost look was gone from her eyes. At first I thought I wanted to gut Elida and hang her in the sun to dry. Now I know I want nothing, nothing so much as the day I can tell that leech of a woman that she'll live a long life showing others what happens to anyone who claims I am a dark friend. And Alviarin, Lyanna said in a tight voice. And Alviarin. I was afraid they'd sense me, Swan went on. But there is nothing for them to sense. An advantage they have over. Still, it seems. Lyanna jerked her head angrily, and Swan said, we must use whatever advantages we can find. And be glad for them. The last sounded as if she were trying to convince herself. The final warder disappeared around the distant curve, and Min swallowed the We can talk of it back, she croaked, and stopped to swallow again. Let us just go to the horses. That has to have been the worst. Indeed, as they hurried out of the tower into the noonday sun, it seemed the worst must have passed. A column of smoke rising toward a cloudless sky in the east of the tower grounds was the only sign of old trouble. Groups of men moved in the distance, but none gave a second glance to the 3 women as they scurried past the library, which was built like towering waves frozen in stone. A footpath led deeper into the grounds and westward into a wood of oaks and evergreens that could have stood far from any city. Min's steps lightened when she found the 3 saddled horses still tied where she and Laris had left them, in a small clearing surrounded by leather leaf and paperbark. Swan went immediately to a stout, shaggy mare 2 hands shorter than the others. A suitable mount for my present circumstances, and she looks more placid than the other 2. I was never a good rider. She stroked the mare's nose, and the mare nuzzled into her palm. What is her name? You know? Bella. She belongs to her horse. Gawain stepped from behind a wide-trunked paperback, one hand on the long hilt of his sword. The blood streaking his face made exactly the pattern Min had seen in her viewing her first day back in Tarvok. I knew you must be up to something, Min, when I saw her horse. His red gold hair was matted with blood, his blue eyes half dazed, but he walked toward them smoothly, a tall man with a cat-like grace, a cat stalking mice. Gawain, Min began. We, his sword was out of its scabbard, flicking back Swan's hood, sharp edge laid against the side of her throat, all faster than Min could follow. Swan's breath caught audibly, and she was still, looking up at him, outwardly as serene as though she yet wore the stole. Don't, Gawain, Min gasped. You must not. She took a step toward him, but he flung up his free hand without looking at her, and she stopped. He was as tight as coiled steel, ready to burst out in any direction. She noticed Lyanna had shifted her cloak to hide one hand, and prayed the woman was not fool enough to draw her belt knife. Gawain studied Swan's face, then slowly nodded. It is you. I was not sure, but it is. This disguise cannot. He did not appear to move, but a sudden widening of Swan's eyes spoke of a keen edge pressing harder. Where are my sister and Egwene? What have you done with them? Most frightening to me, with that blood-masked face and half-glazed eyes, with his body tensed almost to quivering and his hand upflung as if he had forgotten it, he never raised his voice or put any emotion into it. He only sounded tired, more tired than she had ever heard anyone sound in her life. Swan's voice was nearly as neutral. The last I heard from them, they were safe and well. I cannot say where they are now. Would you rather they were here in the middle of this feeding frenzy? No Aes Sedai war games, he said softly. Tell me where they were, straight out, so I know you speak the truth. Ilion, Swan said without hesitation. In the city itself. They are studying with an Aes Sedai named Mara Tomanis. They should still be there. Dear, he murmured. For a moment he appeared to think that over. Abruptly he said, they say you are Darther. Black Aja, that would be, would it not? If you really believe that, Swan said calmly, then strike off my head. Min almost screamed as his knuckles whitened on his sword hilt. Slowly she reached out and rested her fingers against his outstretched wrist, careful not to make him think she meant to do anything more than touch. It was like resting her fingers on the rock. Cohen, you know me. You can't think I would help the Black Aja.
All right, everyone. I'm gonna call into this stream for tonight. Gotta get up somewhat early because we're gonna try to go out fishing tomorrow. So I want to thank everyone for stopping by, and everyone keeps stopping by. I appreciate all y'all's support. Until next time, everyone, y'all stay safe. Maybe.